Order 66 almost failed on the bridge of the Tribunal for one reason the Sith never designed into the clone army. Captain Rex had become more than the obedience built into him. In the timeline we know that individuality only buys Ahsoka a few seconds. Rex shakes, cries, reaches for his blasters, and manages to say the name Fives before the inhibitor chip takes control. But if that resistance lasts only a little longer, long enough for Rex to make one conscious tactical decision before the command can fully overwrite him, the consequences are much larger than simply saving Ahsoka from the first volley. Rex would still be surrounded by programmed clones, still trapped aboard a Republic warship whose chain of command has just been weaponized, and still facing a biological control system he does not yet understand. The difference is that he would begin Order 66 with his judgment intact, his access codes active, and Ahsoka beside him rather than running from him. That distinction changes the entire shape of the crisis. The most important thing to establish first is that Rex refusing the order would not mean he somehow proves inhibitor chips can be defeated by willpower alone. Canon makes the opposite point. Rex does resist, but the effort is visibly agonizing, and it ultimately fails until Ahsoka has the chip surgically removed. So this alternate timeline works best if the divergence is extremely narrow. Rex does not become immune. He manages to hold the command back for perhaps 10 or 15 additional seconds, and in those seconds he deliberately turns his training against the mechanism trying to control him. He recognizes what is happening because Fives warned him years earlier. He does not fully understand the biology, but he understands enough to know that the impulse to kill Ahsoka is not naturally his. That awareness gives him a tactical option cannon Rex never reaches in time, and Palpatine's transmission ends. Rex's hands are already moving toward his DC-17 pistols. The bridge troopers see the motion and assume their commander is about to execute the order. Instead, Rex draws and fires, aiming for weapons rather than bodies, so the bridge crew is disarmed without turning the opening seconds into an execution. One blaster rifle spins from a trooper's hands. Another clone takes a stun bolt before he can raise his weapon. Rex kicks a third man's rifle aside while shouting at Ahsoka to move. For Ahsoka, this is confusing for less than a second. She has just felt something terrible happen through the Force. She sees Rex fighting his own men. She sees every clone on the bridge turning toward her with a kind of mechanical certainty that does not resemble ordinary fear or mutiny. The exact explanation can wait because survival cannot, so Ahsoka ignites her lightsabers and reacts to the threat in front of her before trying to understand its cause. Rex does not tell her to run alone, and he places himself between her and the nearest firing line. That is the first major divergence. It matters emotionally, but its tactical importance is greater. Ahsoka is no longer trying to survive the opening ambush while avoiding killing Rex. In canon, a great deal of her initial attention is divided between escape and confusion. Here, she immediately has an ally who understands 501st tactics from the inside. The bridge crew reacts predictably. Lieutenant Jesse is the key figure because once Rex openly disobeys the Chancellor's command, the problem is no longer simply that Ahsoka is a target. Rex himself becomes one. The inhibitor chip does more than create hostility toward Jedi. It reframes loyalty to the Republic around the execution order. Rex is now obstructing what the controlled clones experience as legitimate authority. From Jesse's perspective, that makes him a traitor, and Jesse orders both of them detained and, if necessary, killed. That order is important because it clarifies the chain of command. Rex's rank and reputation do not vanish instantly, but authority only functions while subordinates accept it. The bridge clones have just received a higher order directive from the Supreme Chancellor that their chips compel them to obey. Rex's command therefore becomes illegitimate in their minds the moment it conflicts with Order 66. So Rex cannot simply say, "Stand down," and expect the bridge to freeze. What he still possesses is access, and that creates a brief administrative advantage. As senior clone commander assigned to the Mandalore operation, Rex has security credentials tied to the Tribunal's systems. Those credentials would eventually be revoked once Jesse or another officer formally takes control, but that requires time. The ship's computers do not instantly understand that Rex has become a traitor merely because Palpatine sent a command. Unless there is a pre-written override, specifically stripping him of access, which canon does not establish, Rex has a small window in which the ship still recognizes him as authorized command personnel. He uses it, while Ahsoka deflects blaster fire, Rex reaches a bridge console and activates compartmental lockdowns across several decks. This is not a magical ship-wide takeover. That would be too easy. The Tribunal has redundant control points. Engineering can override some commands. Security officers can reroute access, and Jesse can eventually assume more authority. Rex's goal is much narrower, because at this stage, he only needs to create delay. He seals the main bridge approach behind them, so reinforcements cannot immediately pour in. He locks down the nearest armory. He restricts lift access to the detention deck. He also disables automatic targeting authorization for several internal security turrets, because those systems could otherwise turn narrow corridors into death traps. Then he does something even more important. He flags his own account as Command Continuity, a setting meant for battlefield situations where communication with senior officers becomes unreliable. That buys a few additional minutes before the system accepts a lower-ranking revocation. Ahsoka and Rex escape the bridge together. The immediate consequence is not that they control the Tribunal. They have denied Jesse clean control. This is analytically significant because the entire canon sequence depends on Ahsoka operating as a fugitive inside a ship whose military structure belongs to the clones. Here, the structure itself is contested. Rex's credentials become a weapon in the same way Ahsoka's knowledge of clone behavior becomes one. The ship turns into a command struggle rather than a simple manhunt. Jesse responds by declaring Rex compromised. That wording matters. He cannot simply describe Rex as disobedient, because every clone aboard knows his record. Rex is one of the most respected officers in the 501st. If Jesse wants immediate compliance, he needs an explanation that fits the chip-driven worldview. Ahsoka has corrupted him, and that becomes the narrative. The Jedi traitor has manipulated Commander Rex. All loyal troops are ordered to treat him as hostile until he can be secured. This gives the controlled clones a psychologically coherent reason to fire on their commander. It also creates the first crack Rex can later exploit. Because if Rex can prove he was not mind-controlled by Ahsoka, Jesse's explanation weakens. For now, proof is irrelevant. The 332nd is mobilizing. Rex knows exactly what that means. He knows how his men clear decks. He knows which squads specialize in boarding actions. He knows how Jesse will divide corridors. He knows which tactical habits come from Anakin and which came from Rex himself. That knowledge is more valuable than raw firepower. Ahsoka is faster than the clones. Rex knows where they will be before they arrive, and together, they avoid the first major containment sweep. Rex directs Ahsoka through maintenance corridors instead of obvious access routes. He opens one blast door remotely, then closes another behind a squad to create the impression they are moving toward the forward hangar, and Jesse sends men that way. Ahsoka asks where they are actually going. Rex says the medical bay. That answer tells us something important about his state of mind. He is not thinking primarily about escape. He is thinking about fives. If his own body tried to make him kill Ahsoka, then the old warning about the inhibitor chip was real. Rex's first analytical conclusion would be biological, not political. He does not yet know Palpatine is Darth Sidious. He does not know Order 66 is the culmination of the Sith plan. He knows something in clone biology is overriding choice, and the medbay can test that. The problem is reaching it. Jesse knows Rex well enough to predict that too, and medical access becomes one of the first areas he secures. So Rex changes priorities again. They need a distraction, which brings Maul back into the equation even though neither of them can pretend releasing him is safe. Releasing Maul in canon is an act of desperation. Ahsoka understands that Maul will cause chaos and uses him because she has almost no other option. Here, Rex makes the same choice more deliberately and with clearer tactical boundaries. This distinction matters because the user premise asks for a controlled tactical distraction, but Maul cannot truly be controlled. He is Maul, which means he has his own objectives and cannot be treated like another asset in Rex's command structure. Any plan that depends on him following instructions after release is not credible. Rex and Ahsoka therefore design the release around incentives rather than obedience. Maul wants off the ship, while the clones are focused on killing Ahsoka, so their competing priorities can be made to collide for a short time. If Maul is released in a section that draws clone patrols away from the medical bay and hangars, he will naturally move toward escape routes. The danger is the hyperdrive. In canon, Maul destroys the hyperdrive engines during his rampage, causing the Tribunal to fall from hyperspace and eventually crash into a moon. Rex knows enough about the ship to identify that as the catastrophic failure condition, so they release Maul nowhere near engineering. Ahsoka accesses his containment chamber remotely, while Rex reroutes blast doors to shape the available path. The route leads toward a cargo sector and auxiliary hangars, not the main hyperdrive control. Maul emerges. He immediately understands something has changed. The clones who were guarding him are now receiving different priorities. Ahsoka is no longer simply his captor. The Republic itself appears to be tearing apart. Maul senses the larger truth through the Force, before Rex understands it politically. Sidious has moved, and the Jedi are already dying across the galaxy, even if Rex cannot yet see the full scale of it. For Maul, the release is not merely an escape opportunity. For Maul, the chaos is confirmation that Sidious has finally moved, and the realization draws a grim laugh rather than surprise. Then he attacks the first clone squad that reaches him, and Rex hears the blaster fire over internal comms. Ahsoka asks if this was a mistake. Rex says it will be if Maul reaches engineering. That line captures the entire logic, and Maul is useful because he is dangerous to everyone. He remains dangerous to them too. Rex uses command access to track doors opening ahead of Maul. When the path begins drifting toward a maintenance junction connected to engineering, Rex seals the section and opens a route toward the auxiliary launch bays. Maul can feel that the route is being manipulated around him, and although he resents it, the open path toward escape remains too useful to ignore. He also sees the obvious escape path, while the moment their interests align. This reduces clone pressure enough for Rex and Ahsoka to reach a secondary medical station. The facility is not designed for mass neurosurgery. That matters later. For now, they need only one definitive scan, so Rex lies down and lets the medical droid search for the same anomaly Fives once described. A medical droid performs a neurological image using the parameters he remembers from Fives' investigation. When the chip appears in exactly the expected location, suspicion becomes hard proof, and both Ahsoka and Rex are forced to confront what Fives had been trying to tell them. For him, this is the moment Fives stops being a tragic brother who lost control and becomes the man who understood the war before anyone else. The emotional effect would be enormous, and Rex watched Fives die. He accepted the official explanation enough to keep serving, and he kept doubts, but doubts did not change his behavior. Now he knows Fives died, trying to save every clone in the army. That realization becomes the engine of everything Rex does afterward. The mission is no longer only Ahsoka, the mission is the clones. This is where the scenario becomes analytically larger than a shipboard escape. If Rex simply helps Ahsoka flee, the broader galaxy changes very little. If Rex understands that every clone is carrying the same mechanism, then he possesses a strategic objective no other character has at that moment. Stop Order 66 from controlling as many brothers as possible. The challenge is scale. Rex cannot remove thousands of chips in minutes. The Tribunal contains far more personnel than one medical bay can process. The 332nd itself is a company-sized force, but the ship also carries other clone crew and support personnel. Even if every surgery takes only a short time, the bottleneck is enormous. So the correct response is triage, and Rex identifies officers first. The logic is straightforward. Jesse matters because command can influence the men, while medical personnel can expand extraction capacity and security leaders can reduce resistance. Communication staff and pilots follow, because freeing those specialists lets the operation spread beyond a single room. One freed officer can influence dozens of others. One freed medic can start another extraction line. One freed communication specialist can transmit evidence, and the objective is not instant liberation, it is exponential capacity. To reach Jesse, they need to capture him alive, and that becomes the next tactical phase. Ahsoka wants to avoid killing any clone, and Rex agrees emotionally. He is more realistic operationally. A ship full of trained soldiers using lethal weapons cannot be subdued perfectly without casualties. Stun settings reduce the chance of killing brothers, while carefully controlled gas and flash charges give them ways to break formations without relying on lethal fire. Ahsoka's use of the Force adds another layer of restraint, although none of those tools can guarantee 0 deaths. This is another place where an analytical script has to resist wish fulfillment. The most plausible outcome is that Rex and Ahsoka dramatically reduce clone casualties compared with a conventional firefight, but they cannot promise none. Rex begins building a non-lethal containment plan around the hangar. The main advantage is that he knows 501st Doctrine. Jesse will try to trap them using overlapping fields of fire. Rex can shape the environment before Jesse arrives. He locks weapons lockers. He vents one corridor after confirming no unsealed personnel remain inside, forcing squads toward alternate routes. He activates fire suppression gas in another. He uses internal lighting to create dark sections where Ahsoka can move without being targeted cleanly. R7A7 and the other astromechs can help with systems, but they are not surgical droids, and that distinction matters. They can slice doors, spoof sensors, and reroute controls. And actual chip removal requires medical equipment. The droids become force multipliers rather than miracle doctors. Jesse responds aggressively, and he has a problem Rex does not. He cannot destroy the Tribunal to kill Ahsoka. The ship remains a Republic asset. Its crew remains valuable. So Jesse has to fight internally with some restraint. That gives Rex space. The first containment operation targets a boarding platoon sent to secure the medbay. Rex has them enter through a narrow corridor, and Ahsoka cuts the lights. Stun gas floods behind them. Rex fires from cover using stun settings. Ahsoka uses the Force to pull rifles away, rather than deflecting shots back into bodies. Within minutes, the squad is unconscious. Rex removes helmets and checks breathing. Then he has the medical droid scan one. The scan shows the same chip in the same location, which is enough for Rex to stop treating his own implant as an isolated anomaly. The evidence is universal enough for him, and he no longer needs to test every man before acting. Now the question becomes whether he can free enough of the ship before Jesse revokes his access. That race defines the Tribunal's survival. Jesse recognizes that the ship is being turned against him before he understands how. Blast doors close where they should open, patrols lose access to internal maps for a few seconds at a time. Security feeds show Ahsoka in one corridor and then disappear before a squad can reach her. From his perspective, this reinforces the belief that Rex has been compromised by a Jedi. That interpretation is important because Order 66 does not erase Jesse's tactical intelligence. The chip controls the moral framework through which he sees the situation, but he remains the same experienced ARC trooper underneath it. He can adapt, so he stops chasing Rex through systems Rex controls, and he orders local command posts to operate manually. That is exactly what Rex expects. Manual control is slower. Slower control creates openings. This becomes an asymmetric contest between two men who know each other's habits. Rex has fewer people, while Jesse controls most of the crew, but Rex still possesses senior credentials that give his smaller side leverage the numbers alone do not reveal. Jesse has the obedience of the ship's remaining crew. Rex understands the chip is the enemy. Jesse believes Ahsoka is. The more Rex thinks about it, the more obvious the next objective becomes. He has to make Jesse doubt at the biological level rather than through philosophy, because the chip is not going to be defeated by a debate about loyalty. A speech will not defeat a chip. A scan might create enough confusion in the soldiers around Jesse to buy another opening, especially if some clones remember fives. Rex uses a dormant ship-wide training channel that Jesse has not yet locked because it normally carries simulation data rather than command traffic, and he broadcasts his own scan. He attaches one message. Fives was right. The transmission lasts only seconds before Jesse shuts it down. That is enough for dozens of clones to see it. Most continue following Order 66. The chip is stronger than curiosity. A few clones hesitate, and even that brief uncertainty matters, because Order 66 depends on action happening faster than doubt can spread. A clone who hesitates while covering a door is slower to fire, and a medic who sees the scan may remember TUP. An officer who heard rumors about fives may decide not to delete the message immediately. Rex is planting information inside an army designed to act before information can spread. That is the central strategic struggle. Jesse responds with a counter-message. Rex is under Jedi influence. Medical data transmitted by a traitor is compromised. All personnel are to ignore unauthorized material. Again, that is tactically sensible. It also reveals the weakness of the controlled narrative. If the scan means nothing, why must every clone be told not to look at it? Rex exploits that. He begins directing his efforts toward medical personnel. Ahsoka asks why not the armory. Rex says because weapons do not fix brothers, and that sentence marks the shift in his priorities. The main medbay is heavily guarded. Rex cannot reach the main medbay directly, so he uses a secondary surgical route that Jesse has less reason to prioritize. The Tribunal carries multiple treatment stations because a Venator-class warship operating through a major campaign cannot rely on one room for every casualty. A smaller surgical unit near the flight deck becomes their target. They need enough capacity to remove several chips, and Rex chooses the officers who will matter most. He chooses targets according to what each freed person can multiply. A medical specialist can expand surgery, a security sergeant can open controlled sectors, a communications technician can preserve the evidence, and Jesse can influence the chain of command itself. Jesse is hardest because he will never voluntarily enter a trap while Rex remains active. So Rex creates a reason. He deliberately lets Jesse trace one of his access attempts to the auxiliary hangar. Jesse interprets it as an escape preparation. That conclusion is reasonable. If Ahsoka and Rex can reach a shuttle, they can disappear. Jesse moves personally because he does not trust anyone else to finish the capture, and Rex knows he will. The plan is built around that confidence. The hangar looks abandoned when Jesse arrives. A small clone force spreads across the deck. They move in disciplined intervals. The clones do not waste fire on shadows or break formation, which reminds Rex that the men hunting him are still highly disciplined soldiers, even while their judgment has been stolen. Rex watches through a maintenance camera and quietly tells Ahsoka that he trained them too well. Ahsoka says Anakin would call that a good problem. Rex does not answer because the reference to Anakin hurts more than he wants Ahsoka to see. They still do not know what happened to Anakin. Ahsoka can feel something terrible through the Force, but the truth remains outside their immediate situation. Jesse reaches the center of the hangar. Rex triggers the trap. Emergency shields divide the space into compartments. Ahsoka drops from an overhead platform. She does not attack Jesse first, and she attacks rifles. The Force pulls weapons into the air. Rex fires stun bolts into the squads, isolated behind the nearest shield. Flash charges detonate near the far group, and the whole engagement lasts less than a minute. Jesse is good enough to avoid the first stun shot. Jesse fires at Rex, who ducks beneath the shot and closes the distance before Jesse can reset his aim. Jesse shouts that Rex has betrayed the Republic. Rex answers that someone put a control device in their heads before either of them was old enough to speak. Jesse fires again. Rex does not try to convince him. Closing the distance is a tactical choice because Jesse's armor makes a clean disabling shot difficult while he remains in motion. Stun bolts can drop him, but a clear shot is difficult while he is moving. Rex knows how Jesse fights at close range. Jesse knows the same about Rex. The exchange becomes ugly and personal. Two clone officers trained by the same army are now fighting over whether their own minds belong to them. Ahsoka could end it immediately with the Force. She hesitates because she knows Rex needs to be the one who brings Jesse through this if possible. Then Jesse reaches for a grenade. Ahsoka acts. The grenade flies from his hand. Rex fires. The stun bolt hits Jesse in the chest. He drops. Rex catches him before his helmet strikes the floor. That detail matters. Even under fire, Rex still treats Jesse as a brother rather than an enemy. The remaining conscious clones see it. The chip tells them Rex is a traitor, and the behavior does not fit. Ahsoka and Rex secure the hangar, not permanently. Jesse will have reinforcements coming, but long enough. They move him to the surgical station. The first extraction begins. Rex watches. This is different from removing his own chip. If the operation fails, Jesse dies because Rex chose to cut into his brain. The medical droid explains the risk, and Rex authorizes it. Ahsoka asks whether he is sure. Rex says Fives never got the chance. The chip is removed, and Jesse wakes later. Confusion comes before memory. Then the memory hits. He looks at Rex. He asks whether he shot at him. Rex says yes. Jesse asks whether he meant to. Rex says no. That answer is the first thing Jesse can hold on to. Then Rex shows him the chip. Jesse stares at it. He does not immediately become useful, and this is another place where the scenario needs realism. A soldier who has just learned his mind was controlled will not wake from brain surgery and instantly command a rebellion without emotional consequences. Jesse is horrified. He remembers believing Ahsoka had to die. He remembers believing Rex's resistance was treason. He remembers every order feeling completely rational, and the fact that it felt rational is what frightens him. Rex tells him there will be time to understand later. Right now, there are brothers still under control. Giving Jesse a mission restores enough structure for him to function, and when he asks what Rex needs first, the answer is more medics rather than more weapons. Jesse knows which squads are assigned to casualty stations, and he also knows which officers have access to deck security. Within an hour, the extraction pipeline expands from one bed to several. This does not mean the whole 332nd is free. Far from it. What changes is the direction of the conflict. Rex's side begins growing from 2 allies into a small group, then into enough freed personnel to staff a medical team and support additional containment operations. Every freed clone understands the problem from inside, and that makes them ideal for non-lethal containment. They know how their controlled brothers think because they were those brothers minutes earlier. They also understand that a man firing at them may wake later with no moral connection to the act. That knowledge changes behavior. The firefights become restraint operations. Stun settings become standard. Gas is used where ventilation can isolate a section safely. Shock grenades replace fragmentation grenades. Ahsoka becomes less necessary in every corridor because freed clones can handle smaller captures themselves. This is the exponential effect Rex needed. Jesse becomes particularly important. He still possesses authority over many of the same men he commanded while under the chip. Some will not obey him once they realize he has turned against Order 66. Others hesitate because Jesse was the officer telling them Rex was compromised only an hour earlier. That contradiction is powerful. When Jesse appears on a secure internal channel and says he was wrong, clones listen. He does not ask them to trust Ahsoka, and he asks them to report for a medical scan. That is a much smaller request. A few clones accept the request while most do not, which is exactly why verification has to spread incrementally rather than through one dramatic conversion. Those who accept become another wave of freed personnel, and this is how Order 66 begins unraveling aboard one ship. Order 66 begins unraveling aboard the Tribunal through verification rather than heroic speeches, because a scan can show a controlled clone, something rhetoric cannot. The clones do not have to believe philosophy. They can see the implant. They can compare behavior before and after removal. That evidence is almost impossible to suppress once enough people have it. Jesse's role also changes the moral shape of the story. In canon, he dies on the moon after leading the 332nd against Rex and Ahsoka. Here, Jesse becomes one of the first clones to understand exactly what happened to him, and he has to live with it. That is harder in some ways. Death would freeze Jesse's role in the Purge, whereas survival forces him to process what happened and decide what he will do with the memory. Jesse remembers the speech he gave in the hangar about Rex committing treason. He remembers ordering his brothers to kill Ahsoka. He knows the chip caused the certainty. He still heard his own voice. That trauma would likely stay with him for the rest of his life. Rex understands before anyone else, and he tells Jesse that remembering does not make the Order his choice, and Jesse asks how Rex knows. Rex says because he almost made the same choice, and that becomes the emotional core of the freed 302nd. No one can claim a morally superior form of resistance simply because the chip took hold at a different speed. Some held out longer than others, but the mechanism was designed to remove choice from all of them. The difference does not determine moral worth. The chip was designed to remove choice. Their response afterward is where choice returns, and while the medical operation grows, Maul is still moving. This remains the most dangerous uncontrolled variable. Rex tracks him through intermittent security alerts. Rex is angered by the clone deaths Maul has caused, because necessity does not make the cost of releasing him emotionally neutral. He knew release would cost lives. The fact that the plan was necessary does not make the cost abstract. Ahsoka feels the same conflict. They are trying to save the 302nd, and they released someone who sees clones as obstacles. That tension cannot be resolved cleanly. The best they can do is limit where Maul can go. Rex uses freed security officers to keep engineering sealed, and Maul eventually reaches an auxiliary hangar. He finds a shuttle, and the hangar doors are locked. Ahsoka contacts him through the internal system. Maul looks toward the speaker. He asks whether she intends to imprison him again while the galaxy dies. Ahsoka says she intends to keep him away from the hyperdrive. Maul understands that she knows what he might do. When Maul asks what Ahsoka wants, she tells him to leave, which surprises both the former Sith and Rex, even though the tactical logic is difficult to dispute. Letting Maul escape creates a future threat, and keeping him aboard creates an immediate threat. The analytical choice is straightforward. The Tribunal is full of wounded clones and ongoing chip extractions. Recapturing Maul would require resources they do not have, and if they attempt it and fail, he may reach engineering, so they choose the lesser danger. Rex opens the auxiliary hangar. Maul takes the shuttle. Before departure, he sends one final transmission. He tells Ahsoka the Republic is already dead. Maul takes the opening and leaves, which removes the largest uncontrolled threat to the hyperdrive and gives the Tribunal a realistic chance of surviving intact. The hyperdrive remains intact. That single mechanical fact changes almost everything about the aftermath. In canon, The destruction of the hyperdrive forces the ship out of hyperspace near a moon, and the cruiser's systems fail. Escape becomes a race against impact, and hundreds of clones die in the crash. Here, none of that happens. The Tribunal remains damaged internally, but spaceworthy. Rex orders helm control transferred to a freed officer. The ship exits hyperspace deliberately at a remote coordinate. That decision matters. Continuing directly toward Coruscant would be suicidal, and the capital is where Palpatine controls the government. If Order 66 has gone out across the army, any Republic fleet near Coruscant could treat the Tribunal as compromised once Ahsoka is detected aboard. Rex instead chooses an uninhabited system outside major traffic. The ship powers down its long-range transponder, giving the 380-second-something cannon never gives them at this moment. Time for medical teams to begin systematic extraction. The process takes hours and then days. The first priority remains officers. After the officers, the extraction pipeline expands toward pilots and security personnel before working steadily through the broader company. Ahsoka insists that every clone be restrained during awakening until the medical team confirms the chip is gone. That precaution is not a statement of mistrust, but a basic safety measure, because a surgery can fail, and no one yet understands every variable in the chip's design. A second implant could theoretically exist. No one knows the full design. The protocol becomes standardized. The process settles into a repeatable medical sequence in which each clone is scanned before extraction, checked again afterward, then awakened under observation so the team can document what changed before returning him to duty. Return to duty only after neurological stability is confirmed. This is the beginning of a military medical doctrine no one in the Republic ever expected to need. Rex keeps one removed chip preserved. One preserved chip becomes several, and then many, because Rex understands that evidence becomes harder to dismiss as anomaly once the same mechanism is removed repeatedly. A single implant can be dismissed as anomaly, and dozens from different clones show design. Jesse suggests recording testimonies immediately. Rex agrees. The statements are difficult to hear. Clones describe the same experience. A command arrives. The Jedi become enemies. Contradictory memories remain present, but emotionally irrelevant. Choice collapses. After extraction, the moral frame returns, and this pattern is stronger evidence than the implants alone. Ahsoka watches several recordings. She realizes the Jedi were not betrayed by the clones in the ordinary sense. They were betrayed through them. That distinction changes how she experiences the Purge. It also changes how she will talk about the clones later. The word traitor becomes almost impossible for her to use, and the same information changes Rex's political understanding. He begins asking a question that points directly toward Palpatine. Who had the authority to send the command? The immediate answer is the Supreme Chancellor, whose authority sits at the top of the command that activated the chips. Rex does not yet know Palpatine is Sidious. He no longer needs to know that to understand there has been a coup. A head of government used a hidden biological mechanism to override an army and order the killing of the Jedi. Whatever legal language surrounds Order 66, that act destroys the legitimacy of the command structure in Rex's mind. The Republic may still exist on paper, and Rex no longer believes its executive authority can be trusted. That is a radical change for someone who spent his entire life serving it. It is also the foundation of his later resistance. The freed 332nd reaches the same conclusion at different speeds. Some clones want to contact Kamino, and others assume Kamino must have been involved. Some want to reach Anakin, and that suggestion hurts Ahsoka. She has felt his presence through the Force become dark and distant. She cannot explain exactly what that means. Rex still thinks of Anakin as their general. Jesse suggests Skywalker might be one of the few Jedi capable of understanding the clone evidence quickly. Ahsoka says they should contact Obi-Wan first, and the choice is emotional and strategic. Obi-Wan is a council member. He is more likely to be alive if any senior Jedi survived. He is also less politically entangled with Palpatine than Anakin. Rex agrees. Before they can transmit, another signal arrives. The Jedi Temple emergency beacon. The beacon orders surviving Jedi to return to Coruscant, and Ahsoka stares at it precisely because the message looks authentic enough to be dangerous. Rex says that is exactly why they should not follow it blindly, and Ahsoka understands. If the temple is occupied, the beacon is a trap, and the Tribunal has something the surviving Jedi do not. A functioning military communications array under control of soldiers who know Order 66 is false. That is where Rex makes the decision that turns one saved ship into a galactic variable. He broadcasts a warning. Rex's warning is not a galaxy-wide cure, and that has to be clear. Order 66 has already been transmitted through official command channels. On many fronts, the first volley has already happened. Commander Cody may already have ordered the shot that knocks Obi-Wan into the sinkhole on Utapau. Bly may already be turning on Isla Secura. Bakara may already have fired on Ki-Adi-Mundi. Plo Koon's pilots may already be attacking his starfighter. A message from Rex cannot overpower a neurological command through radio waves. If it could, the inhibitor chip would cease to matter, so the purpose of the broadcast is different. The broadcast is meant to preserve evidence and create enough doubt that any clone who has not yet acted might open a survival window for himself or his Jedi. Rex uses clone-specific encryption formats rather than Jedi channels. That increases the chance active military units will receive the burst before Imperial communications can classify it as hostile. The message contains 4 things: his identity, an image of the extracted chip, a warning that Order 66 is a forced neurological override, a request to scan before obeying any further anti-Jedi directive if the recipient is still capable of doing so. He includes Fives' name deliberately. That matters among clones. Fives is not an abstract whistleblower to them, he is a brother many served beside. Rex knows some commanders heard rumors. He also knows rumors spread through clone ranks differently from official reports. A reference to Fives can reach memory where a technical explanation cannot. Rex includes Cody and Wolf among the commander frequencies, knowing he may already be too late for one or both of them. Gregor's old service channels are included, even though Rex has no idea whether Gregor is in a position to receive anything. Several other commanders receive the burst, and the effect varies completely by circumstance. A commander whose chip is fully active may delete the message as enemy propaganda. A commander whose transmission was delayed may see the evidence before receiving Order 66. A clone not currently assigned near a Jedi may read it later and begin questioning why his memories around the command feel wrong. A medic may preserve the scan. A communications officer may copy the file before a superior orders deletion. This is not immediate rebellion. It is contamination of Sidious's narrative, and that is strategically significant. Order 66 is designed not only to kill Jedi, but to make clone obedience look seamless. If even a few units preserve evidence that the command altered behavior, the new Empire has a security problem. The Tribunal becomes the source. That also makes the ship a target. Rex understands the risk. A Venator cannot hide indefinitely. Its transponder is registered. Its crew roster exists. Its last known mission involved Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul. If Republic Command realizes the ship has stopped responding normally, fleets may be sent, so the extraction operation now races against detection. The freed officers begin discussing whether they should abandon the Tribunal. Rex argues against immediate abandonment, and the ship is too valuable. It carries medical facilities. It carries long-range communications. It carries fighters and shuttles. Most importantly, it can move hundreds of clones who would otherwise be stranded. Ahsoka asks the harder question: can they keep it without becoming exactly what the Empire expects to find? Rex says only if they stop thinking of the ship as a warship and start thinking of it as a lifeboat. That becomes the guiding principle. The Tribunal will not attack Republic forces unless necessary. The Tribunal will move rather than seek open battle, using its medical capacity to free clones while preserving the evidence, and once that work becomes impossible to hide, the ship will disappear from normal military space. This is how the Rogue Clone Legion begins. Not with an announcement, with one ship refusing to hand its people back to a government that stole their minds. The extraction of the 382nd continues. The numbers matter. A company is small compared with the Grand Army, but large enough to become a meaningful military unit once free. Even if not every clone aboard belongs to the 382nd, Rex can prioritize the men who served directly under Ahsoka on Mandalore, because their loyalty and experience make them easier to coordinate after removal. The process is psychologically painful because some clones wake furious, while others are simply disoriented, and neither reaction means they are ready to return to combat immediately. A few do not remember the activation clearly because the compulsion merged with stress. Medical droids begin documenting psychological symptoms, and Jesse insists that the records be preserved. He understands something Rex does too. One day someone will claim the chips did not matter. The only defense will be evidence collected while memories are fresh. This gives the 332nd an unusual post-war identity. They remain soldiers, but their survival also makes them witnesses to the biological mechanism behind the Purge. Every member carries testimony about the mechanism Sidious used to execute the Jedi. That makes them dangerous politically, even if they never fire another blaster. Ahsoka spends time with the recovering men, and some cannot look at her. That reaction hurts her more than open hostility would. They painted their helmets in her colors. Then the chip turned those same men into executioners. Ahsoka refuses to let them apologize for something they did not choose. One clone says he remembers wanting her dead, and Ahsoka tells him memory is not consent. The phrase spreads. That may become one of the most important principles in the liberated unit. Memory is not consent. The Empire will later insist clones followed lawful orders, and the 332nd knows otherwise. The political implications become clearer when Rex begins reviewing command traffic captured during Order 66. The transmission came from Palpatine. That much is undeniable. The code phrase activated a response universal enough to affect nearly everyone. Rex starts asking whether the Kaminoans knew. The answer is almost certainly yes at some level. Nala Se knew the chips existed and helped conceal their function during the Five's investigation. Lama Su knew the protocol had a hidden purpose tied to orders from Tyrannus. The freed clones do not know those details yet, and they know Kamino built them. That makes the homeworld of the clone army emotionally complicated. Some want to return and confront the Kaminoans, and others never want to see the planet again. Rex refuses to decide immediately. The immediate priority remains finding surviving Jedi. Ahsoka attempts a secure contact with Bail Organa. That choice is based on trust. Bail helped her during the bombing crisis. He has long-standing relationships with the Jedi. He is also a senator, which means contact could be compromised. So they use a channel outside normal Republic military routing. Ahsoka sends a short message. She is alive. Rex is alive. Order 66 was forced through clone inhibitor chips, and they possess proof. Bail receives the message aboard the Tantive Ifoa, and at that moment, he is already involved in rescuing surviving Jedi. The information changes his understanding immediately. He has seen clone troops attack the Jedi Temple. He knows something impossible happened, and now Rex is telling him the army was biologically controlled. Bail responds with rendezvous coordinates far from Coruscant. This is how the Tribunal intercepts the Tantive Fort before Obi-Wan and Yoda make their return to the capital. The meeting is one of the most consequential in the alternate timeline. The Tantive Fort is small beside the Venator. It approaches cautiously. Rex orders all weapons powered down, and Ahsoka waits in the hangar. When Obi-Wan steps off Bail's shuttle, he sees her and stops. While a brief moment, the Purge disappears behind relief. Obi-Wan's first reaction is relief that Ahsoka is alive, and he embraces her before noticing Rex, whose presence beside her creates a much more complicated response after Cody's attack. Obi-Wan has just survived an attack by Cody. He knows clones are killing Jedi. Seeing Rex standing freely beside Ahsoka creates immediate confusion. Rex removes his helmet and addresses Obi-Wan as General Kenobi, a familiar form of respect that now sounds painfully out of place after the Purge. Obi-Wan asks why Rex did not turn. Rex says he almost did. That answer leads directly to the medical bay. Yoda studies the extracted chips. A medical droid shows scans from before and after removal. Jesse gives testimony alongside several other freed clones, allowing Yoda and Obi-Wan to compare multiple accounts rather than relying on Rex alone. Obi-Wan listens without interruption. When the evidence ends, he sits quietly. The meaning is personal. Cody's betrayal was not the betrayal Obi-Wan believed, and the man he trusted did not decide to kill him. A mechanism inside his brain decided for him, and that realization does not remove pain, and it changes its direction. Obi-Wan's anger moves away from Cody and toward whoever designed the command. Yoda's reaction is more strategic. He asks how long the Jedi knew about the chips. Rex explains Fives, and Obi-Wan remembers the case. Ahsoka explains the connection. Tup's killing of General Tippler led Fives to the implant, and before the investigation could mature, Palpatine became personally involved while Fives died branded as unstable. The Council accepted the Kaminoan explanation. Yoda closes his eyes, and the Jedi did not lack warning. They misclassified it. That is one of the hardest truths of the Purge. Insidious did not invent the trap at the last second. Evidence existed. The war made every piece look like a separate crisis, and this analytical understanding changes what Yoda and Obi-Wan do next. They still need to return to the temple. The false beacon is still drawing Jedi to Coruscant. The security recordings still matter, but they no longer enter the capital assuming every clone is an enemy by choice. That changes tactics and moral posture. Rex recommends not taking the Tribunal anywhere near Coruscant. The ship is too visible. Bail agrees. A freed clone officer takes command of the Venator and moves it toward a pre-selected hiding route. Rex, Ahsoka, and a small medical team transfer to the Tantive Refuel with physical chip samples. Jesse remains aboard the Tribunal, and that division makes sense. Rex is the strongest witness for the Jedi. Jesse is needed to continue extractions. The ship's survival now depends on clone leadership independent of Rex. That is important for the future Rogue Legion. If everything collapses when Rex leaves the bridge, it is not a real force. Jesse becomes its operational commander, and the Tantive I-4 moves toward Coruscant. Bail reviews the evidence during transit. His political instincts activate quickly. He asks a question the Jedi do not. Can this prove a coup? Rex says it proves someone used the clone army against the Jedi. Bail says the difference matters. To challenge Palpatine legally, they need more than the existence of chips. They need linkage between the transmission and the biological design, which means tracing the command code through the medical architecture and up the chain of authority, rather than asking the Senate to accept implication as proof. The Senate will not remove a chancellor because a clone officer says a hidden implant affected behavior, especially after Palpatine has already branded the Jedi traitors. Ahsoka asks whether the Senate would believe Rex at all. Bail says some would, many would not. Fear has already changed the political environment, and that answer keeps the scenario grounded. Hard biological proof is powerful. It is not magic. Palpatine controls the narrative. He controls security. He controls the emergency state. The Senate is already preparing to hear his declaration of empire. Evidence can preserve opposition. It cannot instantly reverse the coup, so Bail's immediate objective becomes preservation. Copies, independent medical verification, trusted senators, records distributed across locations. Palpatine cannot erase all at once. The inhibitor chips become the first documentary foundation of anti-imperial resistance. This accelerates rebellion intellectually before it accelerates militarily. Bail no longer has to infer that Palpatine manipulated events. He has physical evidence that the Chancellor's army carried secret control mechanisms. That makes later organization less tentative. He can tell Mon Mothma and other trusted allies that the Republic did not merely collapse through politics, and it was engineered. That is a powerful recruiting argument among people already suspicious of emergency powers. The problem remains proof to the public. Imperial propaganda will say the chips were safeguards. It may claim the Jedi activated them, and it may claim Rex is a deserter corrupted by Ahsoka. Every piece of evidence can be contested, so Bail needs surviving institutions. Bail needs independent medical experts who can verify the implants, senators willing to preserve the findings, and clone witnesses whose testimony cannot all be dismissed as one deserter's story. The Rogue 302nd provides all three categories except the Senate. That is why keeping the tribunal intact matters politically as much as militarily. A crashed ship would leave bodies. A surviving ship leaves witnesses. The Tantive I-4 reaches Coruscant through concealed diplomatic access. Rex stays aboard at first. His face is recognizable enough that Imperial clone forces could identify him, and Ahsoka remains hidden too. Yoda and Obi-Wan proceed with the temple infiltration. This time they carry stun options and avoid killing clones when possible. That does not mean the mission becomes non-violent, and the temple is occupied by troops under Order 66. Some fire immediately, and the Jedi defend themselves. The difference is psychological. Obi-Wan no longer sees every clone as someone who consciously chose Sidious. That reduces anger, and it may also save lives. More importantly, Rex provides tactical data on clone patrol methods. He has spent years inside the same military culture. He can predict where 501st squads will position. He can identify blind areas created when internal security assumes Jedi will use familiar entrances. Yoda and Obi-Wan enter more quietly. They alter the beacon. Then they reach the recordings, and the footage shows Anakin. That truth still lands like a weapon, and the chip evidence cannot explain it. Anakin is not a clone, which means his manipulation by Sidious cannot be equated with the biological override that removed Rex's choice. Obi-Wan watches his former Padawan kneel. He watches him lead the 501st. He sees the distinction Rex's story made so painfully clear, and the clones were controlled. Anakin was manipulated, but not biologically overridden, and that difference matters enormously. It means Obi-Wan cannot simply transfer his new understanding of the clones onto Anakin. Anakin retains responsibility. Ahsoka is brought the recording after Yoda and Obi-Wan return to the Tantive 4. She watches less than Obi-Wan did. Enough. And she sees Anakin killing Jedi. She sees Rex's brothers beside him. Then she stops the image, Rex stands near her. He says nothing. Ahsoka asks whether Anakin knew about the chips, and Rex says he does not know. That uncertainty becomes central to the Mustafar decision. If Anakin joined Sidious before understanding what happened to the clones, then confronting him with the truth may still matter. If he knew and accepted it, the betrayal is deeper. Rex wants the answer. Ahsoka wants the answer for a different reason. Obi-Wan wants to know whether any part of Anakin remains reachable, and Yoda is less optimistic. He has felt the dark side around Anakin, and he believes the boy has been consumed. But the presence of Ahsoka and Rex changes the strategic options. In canon, Obi-Wan goes to confront Anakin because Yoda determines the two remaining senior Jedi must face Vader and Sidious separately. Here, Ahsoka insists on going with Obi-Wan. Yoda initially refuses. She is not a Jedi Knight under Council authority anymore. Ahsoka says that is precisely why the decision is hers. Obi-Wan argues that Anakin's bond with her may create hesitation. Yoda warns that attachment can endanger all of them. Rex speaks last. He says if Anakin is still their general anywhere inside Vader, he needs to hear what Sidious did to the 501st. That argument is not emotional alone, it is evidentiary. Anakin's identity is built partly around loyalty to his soldiers. He repeatedly treats clones as individuals. He values Rex. If he learns Sidious stole their agency to murder Jedi, the information conflicts directly with the story he is telling himself about bringing order and peace. This does not guarantee redemption, and it creates cognitive pressure. Yoda allows them to go, not because he expects a miracle, because multiple relationships may reach parts of Anakin Obi-Wan alone cannot, and Bail provides access to Padme. That creates the next ethical problem. Padme does not know Anakin is Vader. Obi-Wan still needs her to reveal where he went, and this time Ahsoka is present when the truth is discussed. Padme looks at Ahsoka as though asking her to deny it. Ahsoka cannot. Rex remains outside the room. The conversation becomes less accusatory than canon, because Obi-Wan is not alone, carrying the burden. Ahsoka tells Padme that Anakin is alive, and she also says something has happened to him. Padme reveals Mustafar because she intends to go, and Obi-Wan says she cannot. Padme refuses. That part of her character should remain. She believes there is still good in Anakin. Ahsoka does too, though less confidently. Rex wants to accompany them, and Obi-Wan hesitates. Bringing a clone to Mustafar could provoke Anakin if he interprets Rex as another person turned against him. Rex says that is exactly why he needs to go. If Anakin sees his own captain standing there by choice after the chips are removed, the manipulation becomes visible. The group boards Padme's star skiff. There is no need for Obi-Wan to hide aboard. That changes the emotional geometry of Mustafar before anyone lands. Padme knows who is coming. Ahsoka knows. Rex knows. Anakin will not see Obi-Wan suddenly emerge and assume Padme secretly brought him as part of a betrayal. That single difference may matter almost as much as anything Rex says. The approach to Mustafar gives all four of them time to understand how dangerous the confrontation is, and Padme wants to save Anakin. Ahsoka wants to believe the person who trained her still exists. Rex wants to force Anakin to face what happened to the 501st, and Obi-Wan has the least comforting objective. If Anakin cannot be reached, he has to stop him, and that difference creates tension before the ship even lands. Ahsoka asks Obi-Wan whether he intends to kill Anakin. Obi-Wan says he does not know. Padme says that is not an answer. Obi-Wan replies that there is no honest answer until they see who Anakin chooses to be when confronted with the truth. That is the correct analytical framing. Anakin has already crossed lines no conversation can erase. He helped kill Mace Windu indirectly, and he pledged himself to Sidious. He led the Temple Massacre. He slaughtered separatist leaders on Mustafar. The idea that hearing Rex say, "This was wrong," instantly returns him to the light would reduce the seriousness of those choices. What the group can change is the environment around his next choice. In canon, Anakin sees Padme arrive alone, then Obi-Wan emerges unexpectedly from her ship. That confirms the paranoid interpretation Sidious has encouraged. Inside Anakin's paranoid interpretation, Padme's supposed betrayal and Obi-Wan's sudden appearance become one story in which everyone he loves has turned against him. Everyone he loves has chosen the Jedi over him. That is not objectively true, but the staging makes it emotionally believable to someone already consumed by fear. Here, there is no surprise. Padme exits the ship first. Ahsoka follows, and Rex follows unarmed. Obi-Wan comes last with his lightsaber still at his belt. Anakin sees them all. His first reaction is not rage. It is confusion. Why is Rex with them? That question matters. Ahsoka's presence can be interpreted as Jedi loyalty. Obi-Wan's presence can be interpreted as Council opposition. Padme's presence is personal, and Ahsoka's can still be explained away as Jedi loyalty, whereas Rex represents the 501st itself, and therefore disrupts Anakin's attempt to reduce the confrontation to Jedi betrayal. Rex is the officer Anakin trusted with Ahsoka on Mandalore, and Rex is the man whose soldiers just helped Vader seize the temple. If Rex is standing against him voluntarily, the story is harder to simplify, and Anakin asks why they came. Padme says because she needs to hear the truth from him. Anakin begins explaining. He says the Jedi tried to overthrow the Republic. He says Sidious has the power to save her, and he says the war is ending. The same rationalizations are present. Rex interrupts. He asks whether the Republic Anakin saved includes programming soldiers to murder their generals. Anakin stops. Rex places one preserved inhibitor chip on the landing platform. It is sealed in a medical container. He tells Anakin what it is, and Anakin recognizes the concept. Fives. The name appears between them before either says it. Rex explains that Fives was right. The chip took control of the 302nd. It tried to take Rex. It forced Jesse. It affected clones across the army. The command came from Palpatine, and Anakin's face changes. That does not mean he did not know clones were attacking Jedi. He saw them at the temple. He used them. What he may not have understood is the biological mechanism, and Sidious told him the Jedi were traitors, and the clone army obeyed. Anakin was in no state to ask whether that obedience was chosen. Now Rex makes the mechanism concrete. Anakin looks at the chip. Rex says every man in the 501st was bred with one. Then he asks a question designed around the person Anakin used to be. When Rex asks whether Anakin knew about the chips, Anakin says no, and Rex believes him. Which is almost worse because it means Anakin joined Sidious without asking what had been done to the soldiers beside him. It means Anakin joined Sidious without asking what Sidious had done to the men beside him. Rex says the 501st followed Anakin because they trusted him. Sidious made sure trust did not matter. Anakin tells him the chips were necessary because the Jedi had attempted a coup. Rex asks why they were implanted years before the coup happened. That question has no easy answer. Ahsoka sees the effect. Anakin's rationalization depends on treating Order 66 as a response, and the chips prove preparation. Sidious expected the conflict with the Jedi long before Mace entered his office. That means Palpatine's story about reacting to Jedi treason becomes much weaker. Ahsoka adds Maul's warning. She tells Anakin that Maul said Sidious had been grooming him, and Anakin lashes out verbally. Anakin dismisses Maul as a liar, and Ahsoka agrees with the description while refusing the false conclusion that a liar can never possess real information. Then she says that does not make every fact he knew false. She asks why a man supposedly responding to a sudden Jedi coup spent years preparing an army to kill them. Anakin cannot answer without turning toward the deeper truth, so he turns toward fear instead. Padme. He says none of this changes what will happen to her, and that is the emotional center Sidious still controls. Anakin's fall was never primarily an argument about constitutional theory. It was about refusing to accept loss. Padme tells him she does not want to be saved this way. Anakin says she does not understand. Padme says she understands that children died in the temple because he decided her future mattered more than their lives. That sentence hits harder than anything Obi-Wan could say. Anakin's anger rises. He says he did what was necessary, and Ahsoka asks whether Barriss said the same thing, and that comparison is brutal. Barriss also believed institutional failure justified violence. Anakin exposed her because he understood that grievance does not erase responsibility. Now he is using the logic he once rejected. For a moment, he sees it. The dark side does not disappear. It reacts. Anakin accuses Ahsoka of abandoning him, and that is the wound underneath everything. Ahsoka does not defend herself. She says she left the Order. She did not stop caring about him. Anakin says that is easy to say now, and Rex interrupts again. He says Ahsoka came back for the 501st, and she trusted Rex with the Mandalore operation. Ahsoka trusted the men with her life on Mandalore, while Sidious reduced that loyalty to something a hidden command could steal from them. Then Rex makes the argument Anakin has no prepared defense against. He says the 501st fought 3 years believing they were protecting people's right to choose their own future. If Anakin stands with the man who took choice out of their brains, he is betraying every brother who died under his command. The language of ideals matters less to Anakin than the people. Rex knows that. He names no long list, and he does not need to. Fives is enough. Anakin remembers Fives dying in his arms. He remembers believing the clone had gone mad. Now the man responsible for that conspiracy is the man Anakin calls Master. The psychological conflict becomes severe, and Anakin's lightsaber remains unignited. That alone changes the confrontation. Padme steps closer, and she asks him to leave. Not to return to the council. Not to pretend nothing happened. Leave Sidious? Anakin looks at her. For several seconds, the possibility exists. Then the weight of what he has already done enters the decision. This is one of the darkest mechanisms in Anakin's fall. The more terrible acts he commits to save Padme, the harder it becomes to admit the premise was false. If Sidious is a liar and the Jedi coup narrative is manufactured, then Anakin murdered people for nothing. Accepting that truth requires moral collapse before reconstruction. The dark side offers an easier path. Double down. Anakin says it is too late, and Obi-Wan finally speaks. He says too late for what? Anakin says to go back. Obi-Wan tells him no one is asking him to go back. They are asking him to stop, and that distinction matters. Redemption does not mean restoration. Stopping one atrocity does not erase the last one. Anakin does not need to be innocent to make a better choice now. This is exactly the kind of framing that might reach him, and Sidious depends on binary thinking. Sidious depends on binary thinking in which every moral choice becomes Jedi or Sith, every conflict becomes victory or death, and every relationship becomes control or loss. If Anakin believes there is no path back to the person he was, then Vader becomes the only identity left. Obi-Wan opens another possibility. Obi-Wan offers a different category entirely responsibility, because Anakin can surrender and face what he has done without pretending. Surrender makes him innocent. Padme can live without belonging to him, and that option is emotionally unbearable. It is still an option, and Anakin begins to cry. Then fear changes into rage. He says Obi-Wan wants to take Padme away. Padme says she is not something to take. The words destabilize him further, and he reaches toward her with the Force. Ahsoka moves instantly. Her blades ignite. Anakin stops. That is another divergence. He does not complete the choke. He sees Ahsoka between him and Padme. Rex has drawn one pistol, but keeps it lowered. Obi-Wan's hand rests near his saber, and everyone gives Anakin another second, but he chooses violence. His blade ignites. The possibility of immediate surrender ends, and that does not mean the conversation failed. It changed the fight. Anakin is not entering it with complete psychological commitment. His anger is divided between everyone and himself. The dark side still gives him enormous power, and it does not give him clarity. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka fight together. Rex moves Padme toward the ship rather than trying to duel a Force user with blasters. That is the sensible tactical role. Rex is an elite soldier. He is not going to outshoot Darth Vader at close range, and his contribution already happened. He shattered the political justification Anakin was using. Now, he protects the person Anakin fears losing. The duel is very different from canon because two Jedi-trained combatants face Anakin. Ahsoka is not Obi-Wan's equal in defensive mastery. She is faster in different ways. Obi-Wan understands Anakin's power, and Ahsoka understands his improvisation, and Anakin trained her. That familiarity cuts both directions. He knows her patterns. She knows his. The pair do not overwhelm him immediately. Anakin is one of the strongest Jedi combatants of the war. His raw power remains extraordinary. What changes is that he cannot focus all pressure on Obi-Wan. Ahsoka attacks angles. Obi-Wan anchors. This resembles the kind of complementary fighting style that makes team engagements against stronger opponents viable. Anakin responds by using the environment, and he tears machinery loose. He creates separation. He wants Obi-Wan alone because that is the emotional conflict he understands best, and Ahsoka refuses to be isolated. The duel moves through the facility. Rex and Padme follow at a distance toward the skiff. Padme refuses to leave. Rex tells her staying near the fight gives Anakin another target to fear for, and that argument works. She waits by the ship, and Rex stays with her. Inside the mining complex, Anakin grows more dangerous as frustration rises. He accuses Obi-Wan of turning Ahsoka against him, and Ahsoka says no one had to turn her against murdering children. The bluntness hurts. Obi-Wan would phrase it more carefully. Ahsoka does not, and Anakin attacks her harder. Obi-Wan intercepts. For a second, the old roles reverse. Obi-Wan protects the former Padawan Anakin once protected. That visual is psychologically devastating, and Anakin becomes reckless. This is where the combined team gains its real advantage. Canon Obi-Wan defeats Anakin by surviving until Anakin's aggression creates a catastrophic error. With Ahsoka present, that error can be exploited earlier. Anakin drives them onto an exterior platform above the lava channels. He attacks Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka moves behind him. Anakin senses it and turns. Obi-Wan uses the moment to disarm one hand. Anakin still has the Force, and he throws Ahsoka backward. She catches the platform edge, and Obi-Wan moves to help. Anakin attacks. The pattern continues. Every attempt to finish one opponent exposes him to the other. Eventually, Anakin realizes he cannot win cleanly without taking a greater risk. That is exactly when he becomes most dangerous. He leaps toward a higher platform to gain positional advantage. Ahsoka anticipates because she has seen Anakin use vertical aggression throughout the war. She throws one lightsaber not at him, but at the support beneath the landing point, and the structure collapses. Anakin lands badly. Obi-Wan closes. Their blades lock, and Ahsoka retrieves her weapon. Anakin tries to force Obi-Wan backward, and Ahsoka uses the Force to pull his saber arm just enough. Obi-Wan disarms him. The weapon falls into the lava below, and Anakin reaches with the Force. Ahsoka catches the saber first and draws it toward herself, while the first time, Vader is unarmed. That does not make him harmless. He throws Obi-Wan against a wall. He reaches for Ahsoka's throat through the Force, and Rex appears at the edge of the platform. He has a stun rifle. He fires. Anakin senses the shot and turns, and that breaks the Force grip. Obi-Wan recovers and pins Anakin's arms with the Force. Ahsoka joins. Anakin struggles. The raw power nearly breaks both holds. Rex fires again. The stun bolt hits Anakin across the side. It does not knock him unconscious instantly. It weakens him. Obi-Wan closes physically. Ahsoka does too. Together, they bring Anakin down. This is the most plausible major divergence at Mustafar. The result is not instant redemption, but capture. Anakin remains alive and unburned, never entering the Vader suit, even though the crimes already committed remain fully real. He is also a mass murderer, who nearly became the Emperor's chief enforcer. That outcome creates enormous consequences. Padme reaches him after he is restrained, and Anakin looks at her. He expects hatred. She is crying. She says nothing. That silence may be more powerful than forgiveness or condemnation. Rex removes the stun rifle from his hands, and he looks down at the general he served. The victory feels nothing like a victory. Obi-Wan takes Anakin's lightsaber, and Ahsoka asks what they do now. Obi-Wan says they take him somewhere. Sidious cannot reach easily. That is the immediate problem, and Palpatine is still alive. Yoda is going to confront him. The Empire is already being declared, and capturing Vader does not reverse the state coup. It removes one of Sidious's most important weapons. That is strategically enormous. It also gives the Resistance something canon never had. A living witness who knows Palpatine is Darth Sidious, and who participated in the conspiracy's final phase. Whether Anakin is willing to testify is another question. For now, he barely speaks, and the skiff leaves Mustafar. Padme does not die there. That consequence follows from mechanics, not optimism. She was never fully force-choked. She has suffered severe emotional shock, but the specific physical assault that contributed to her collapse in canon did not occur. Medical care still matters. Pregnancy still makes the situation dangerous. There is no reason to assume death is inevitable. So Padme survives childbirth. Luke and Leia are born into a galaxy that has become the Empire, but without losing their mother. That one change reshapes the Resistance as much as Rex's company does. Padme is not simply a grieving wife, and she is a senator who has seen what Sidious did to Anakin. She has access to political networks. She has 2 children who must be hidden. She also has a captured husband whose existence could destroy or destabilize the Emperor's narrative if used correctly. The immediate decision is secrecy. If Palpatine learns Anakin survived Mustafar in rebel custody, he will dedicate enormous resources to recovering or killing him. So the group tells almost no one. Bail knows. Yoda knows if he survives his confrontation. Ahsoka knows. Rex knows. Obi-Wan knows. Padme knows. The freed 382nd is not told the full story, and compartmentalization begins before the rebellion formally exists. Anakin is moved to a secure location under guard. He is treated as prisoner and patient. That distinction is important. The dark side is not a disease that doctors can surgically remove. No one can deprogram Vader like a clone chip, and Anakin made choices. Recovery requires accountability. Ahsoka understands that. Rex understands it even more clearly because he has experienced true biological control. He refuses to let Anakin hide behind the word manipulation. Sidious manipulated him. He did not implant a chip in him. That distinction becomes central to Anakin's future. If he ever returns to the light fully, it will be because he accepts responsibility, rather than because everyone decides Sidious made him do it. This is analytically more interesting than a quick redemption. The early rebellion now contains one man who could become its greatest asset and greatest moral liability. That tension will define the next phase. While Obi-Wan's group is leaving Mustafar, Yoda's confrontation with Sidious still unfolds on Coruscant. Rex's refusal does not prevent that duel, it changes the strategic context around it. Yoda now enters knowing the clone army was forced, and he knows physical evidence exists, and he knows Bail can preserve it. That gives him an objective beyond killing Sidious. Survive if victory is not possible. In canon, Yoda already understands the duel has failed once he loses his position and cannot continue safely. Here, the presence of a living resistance infrastructure makes retreat even more rational. He is no longer one of two surviving Jedi who believe the Order has been nearly erased without explanation. He knows the 302nd survived, and he knows Ahsoka survived. He knows the chips can be removed. So when the duel turns against him, Yoda withdraws without interpreting withdrawal as total defeat. The Emperor survives. That matters because one altered bridge decision cannot simply erase decades of political preparation. Palpatine has already declared the Jedi traitors. The Senate has already been conditioned to accept emergency rule. The Clone Wars have already centralized power around the Chancellor. Order 66 has already killed most of the Jedi. Even without Vader returning from Mustafar, Sidious can still proclaim the Galactic Empire, and the applause still comes. This point is essential. The rebellion accelerates in this timeline, but it begins against an empire that successfully forms. That makes the scenario more plausible, and the coup was institutional, not dependent on one apprentice alone. Vader was critical to destroying the Temple and eliminating the Separatist leadership. He was not the legal mechanism through which the Senate surrendered. That mechanism was Palpatine's political authority. So the Empire rises. What changes is how many contradictions exist inside the victory from the beginning. The first contradiction is the clone evidence, and Bail has physical chips. He has testimony from Rex, and he has medical scans. He has contact with an entire warship full of clones claiming the command took away their choice. The second contradiction is Anakin. Palpatine expects his new apprentice to return. He does not. The Separatist leaders on Mustafar are dead because Anakin already completed that mission before the confrontation. So the war can still be declared over. But Sidious loses the man who would have become the visible fist of the new regime. The third contradiction is Maul. He escaped the tribunal alive. Sidious does not know exactly where he is, and Maul knows Order 66 succeeded. He also knows Ahsoka survived long enough to release him. That leaves a third dark side actor moving through the new Empire's underworld. The fourth contradiction is the tribunal itself. A Venator and hundreds of clone personnel have vanished from command at precisely the moment the Empire claims clone loyalty proves the Jedi coup was real. If that ship ever broadcasts publicly, the narrative becomes harder to sustain. Palpatine responds predictably. He classifies the tribunal as stolen. Rex is declared a traitor. The 302nd is described as compromised by Jedi influence. Ahsoka is named as the person responsible. That explanation is politically useful because it reframes clone testimony before anyone hears it. If Rex later says the chip controlled him, Imperial officials can say Ahsoka altered the evidence after hijacking the ship. This is why Bail does not publish immediately, and the public fight cannot be won through one dramatic broadcast. Evidence needs independent verification. He quietly contacts physicians outside the Jedi Order. They examine several removed chips. They confirm the implant's interface with neurological systems, and that still does not prove Palpatine's exact intent. It proves the clone army contained undisclosed behavioral technology. Bail then contacts trusted senators, Mon Mothma. A small circle of others already uncomfortable with Palpatine's powers. Padme becomes central once she is medically stable. She has something Bail lacks. Direct knowledge of Anakin's confession. Anakin told her Sidious was the Sith Lord. He described the promise of saving her, and he acknowledged joining him. Padmé's testimony could be politically devastating. It is also dangerous. If she speaks publicly while Anakin is hidden, Palpatine can accuse her of participating in the Jedi conspiracy, and the twins become targets. So Padmé does not stand in the Senate the next morning and expose everything. She begins building a case. This is one of the biggest differences between an accelerated rebellion and an impulsive one. The group has military evidence. They possess political evidence and a living insider. But what they still need is timing, because releasing proof before a movement can protect it may only help Palpatine identify his opponents. A rebellion that exposes itself too early can be crushed before networks form. Bail and Padmé understand that problem instinctively, whereas Rex has to learn it because his military impulse is simple. Once proof exists, use it before the enemy can adapt. Bail explains that proof matters only if people can receive it without being arrested before they act. The Empire controls the Senate, it controls major communications, and it controls the military. Even many clones who might sympathize remain chipped. The first task is not uprising, infrastructure. That word defines the early resistance. The surviving 332nd provides a military core. Bail provides political access. Padmé provides legitimacy and intelligence about the Senate. Ahsoka provides contact with Jedi survivors and people outside formal structures. Obi-Wan and Yoda provide continuity with the Old Order, though both are cautious about becoming public leaders. Rex provides clone networks. This is much more integrated than the scattered resistance of canon's earliest Imperial period. That does not mean it becomes a full rebel alliance overnight, and the galaxy is too large. Fear is too strong. Many systems welcome the end of the Clone Wars, and some people genuinely believe Palpatine saved them. The Resistance starts as a disciplined coalition of survivors, and that is still years ahead of canon. The Tribunal becomes its first mobile base. Jesse has completed chip removals for most of the 382nd by the time Rex returns. The ship is hidden inside a remote system with minimal traffic. Transponder codes are changed. Republic markings are partially removed from external identifiers that can be altered without a major shipyard. The Venator remains visually recognizable. That limits movement. A capital ship cannot casually dock at civilian stations without attracting attention. So the Tribunal becomes a mothership that stays far from populated routes. Smaller craft move people and supplies, and this operational limitation matters. A rogue legion with a Star Destroyer sounds overwhelmingly powerful. It is not. The ship consumes enormous fuel. It requires replacement parts. Its fighter complement needs maintenance. Its crew is designed to rely on Republic supply chains. Every resupply creates exposure, so the liberated clones face a paradox, and they possess military power. Using that power makes them easier to find, and that pushes them toward covert doctrine. The Tribunal is hidden. Its people operate in detachments, and the 332nd's greatest asset is not the ship's turbolasers, and it is the expertise inside. Veteran clone officers understand Republic logistics. They know standard encryption. They know how military depots are organized. They know where clone units are deployed. They know which officers might respond to Rex, and this makes them ideal for extraction operations. The first missions target clones, not Imperial facilities, and Rex wants brothers. The strategy is selective. They cannot land on Kamino and remove every chip, and they cannot broadcast one message and expect units to defect. They identify isolated squads where evidence can be presented before Imperial security intervenes. Medical ships are high-value targets. Training facilities are high-value targets. Units commanded by clones known personally to Rex or Jesse are better candidates. This is where Wolf becomes important, and Rex has already transmitted the warning. He does not know how much Wolf received. Finding him becomes an early objective. Gregor's status is harder. Rex has old contacts but no reliable location. That uncertainty fits canon. The network grows through people rather than omniscience, and one freed clone knows another. A medic knows where his unit is rotating. A pilot knows which base accepts wounded troopers. Each rescued man becomes information. The process is slow. It accelerates because the Empire itself begins decommissioning clones over time. As recruits replace them, displaced clones become easier to approach. Some are angry and some are confused. Some remain loyal to the Empire. The chip may no longer be actively forcing behavior every second, but propaganda and institutional loyalty still matter. This prevents the clone resistance from becoming automatic. A liberated clone can know Order 66 was forced and still believe the Empire is preferable to renewed civil war. Rex has to accept that. Choice means allowing people to choose differently after the chip is gone. That lesson becomes central to the Rogue Legion's philosophy. And they are not building another army where obedience defines worth. They are building a force of volunteers, and that changes internal culture. A clone who wants to leave can leave. A clone who wants medical help without joining the rebellion receives it. A clone who wants to fight receives training and assignment. The 332nd gradually becomes less a preserved company and more the nucleus of a veteran network. Its name remains symbolically important because those were the men Ahsoka and Rex first freed. The organization eventually needs another name. Rex resists. He does not want banners. Jesse argues that symbols help people understand what they are joining, and Ahsoka says both are right. The compromise is simple. Internally, they call themselves the Free Companies. The 332nd remains the founding unit. The phrase spreads across rescued clone groups, and that is how a rogue clone legion becomes believable. Not one giant unit moving together. A federation of cells built around shared evidence and mutual support. The military advantage is significant, and these clones are veterans of the hardest campaigns of the war, and they understand droid warfare. They understand urban combat. They understand shipboarding. They understand how Jedi fight because they served beside them. Now that experience is redirected toward the Empire. The political disadvantage is equally significant. Imperial propaganda says deserter clones are defective, and that claim uses the old Kaminoan logic. If a clone refuses authority, something is wrong with the clone, and Rex counters with evidence. The thing that was wrong was the chip, and this creates a struggle over clone identity. Are clones property whose programming malfunctioned, or citizens whose autonomy was violated? The Republic never resolved that question before collapsing, and the rebellion becomes one of the first movements forced to answer. Padme supports citizenship immediately. Bail agrees. Some anti-Imperial senators worry the issue is too explosive. If they publicly support clone rights, Imperial security can accuse them of encouraging military mutiny. Padme says that is exactly why the question matters. A resistance that wants democracy cannot treat its own soldiers as tools. This gives the accelerated rebellion an ideological clarity canon resistance developed more gradually. It is not merely anti-Palpatine. It begins defining what it is for. The emerging coalition begins defining itself around restoration of choice, which means civilian government must outrank military convenience, while clone personhood and limits on executive power become principles rather than afterthoughts. Jedi survival without military rule. Those principles emerge directly from the crisis. Ahsoka's role is unusual. She does not rejoin the Jedi Order, and there is barely an order to rejoin. Yoda and Obi-Wan are alive, and other survivors remain scattered, but the temple is gone, which means there is no intact institution for Ahsoka simply to rejoin. The old council structure is shattered. Ahsoka becomes a bridge between Jedi survivors and non-Jedi resistance because she already knows how to live outside institutional identity. That makes her more valuable than a formal rank would. She can speak to Bail without representing the council. She can work with clones without being their general. She can contact underworld figures without carrying the same expectations as Obi-Wan. This is the beginning of a fulcrum-like role years earlier, and Rex becomes her closest operational partner. Their dynamic is different from canon because they saved more than each other. They carry responsibility for an entire body of freed clones. That creates pressure. Every failed extraction means brothers remain under Imperial control. Every successful operation risks revealing the tribunal. Ahsoka sometimes wants to take bigger risks. Rex sometimes becomes too focused on clone rescue at the expense of wider strategy, and they balance each other. This is where the analytical benefit of their partnership becomes clear. Rex understands systems, and Ahsoka understands people. Neither category is absolute. Rex is empathetic, and Ahsoka is tactical. The difference is emphasis. Together, they can build a resistance that does not treat military efficiency as the only measure of success. That becomes important when Anakin enters the discussion, and he is still in custody. Padme visits, Ahsoka visits less often. Rex visits once, and that conversation matters. Anakin looks physically like himself. No Vader suit, no mechanical breathing. The absence of external transformation makes the moral problem harder. People cannot look at a mask and tell themselves Anakin became someone else. He is visibly the man they knew. The person who killed at the temple is still there. Rex sits across from him, and Anakin apologizes. Rex says not yet. Anakin looks confused. Rex explains that apology becomes meaningful after Anakin can say what he is apologizing for without turning Sidious into the subject of every sentence. This is a remarkably important distinction. Anakin keeps saying, Sidious manipulated him? True. He keeps saying he was afraid for Padme. True. He keeps saying the council failed him. Partly true. Rex tells him none of those facts made the choice for him. Then he places another chip on the table. He says this made choices for clones. Anakin did not have one. That comparison prevents self-pity from becoming moral escape, and Anakin hates hearing it. That is why he needs to. The process of returning from the dark side becomes slow. He is not magically purified because he was captured before being burned, and he experiences rage, shame, denial. At times he insists the Jedi deserved to fall, and at other times he breaks under memory. Padme refuses to let him use her as justification. Ahsoka refuses to let him claim she abandoned him into becoming Vader. Obi-Wan carries grief but does not excuse him, and this environment gives Anakin a path canon Vader did not have. People who love him without agreeing to his lies. That matters. Sidious's manipulation depended partly on convincing Anakin that love required control and loyalty required agreement. The Resistance teaches the opposite. Whether Anakin eventually becomes an active ally is a later question. For the first months, he is simply a prisoner learning to tell the truth. Strategically, his information is still valuable. He knows Palpatine is Sidious. He knows what happened in the office with Mace. He knows the Sith promise that drew him in. He knows the Separatist leadership was serving Sidious's plan, even if he does not understand every mechanism. This testimony strengthens Bail's case, but using it publicly is dangerous. Anakin is also the man who led the Temple assault. The Empire can dismiss him as a captured traitor. The Jedi survivors may hate him. The public may see him as proof that the Jedi were dangerous, so his information is used internally first. It helps reconstruct Sidious's method, and that reconstruction guides the rebellion. Palpatine does not merely command fleets, he isolates people, and he manufactures binaries. He turns institutions against one another, and the early resistance therefore tries to build redundancy and trust. No one person controls everything. Bail handles political networks, Rex handles clone channels, and Ahsoka handles intelligence. Jesse handles much of the Free Company logistics. Padme handles Senate contacts and civilian legitimacy. Obi-Wan and Yoda focus on surviving Jedi and the future of the Force. This distributed structure is less efficient than Imperial command. It is harder to decapitate. That is the first truly strategic advantage the rebels possess. The Empire responds by looking for the missing tribunal, and the search becomes one of its highest priority early operations. Without Vader, Sidious assigns naval intelligence and elite clone commanders who remain loyal. This creates uncomfortable confrontations. Some of the people hunting Rex are men he trained. Some later become freed. Others die believing Rex betrayed them. There is no clean way to win a civil conflict inside the clone army. The Free Companies adopt a rule. Use non-lethal force against clones whenever operationally possible. The rule is not absolute. If a clone is about to kill civilians, survival matters. But the presumption changes. Enemy clones are potential victims of the same system, and this slows some operations. It also becomes a moral distinction from the Empire. The rebels are trying to restore choice to the people shooting at them. That idea is difficult, and it is also powerful. The Rogue Clone Legion becomes one of the first forces in galactic history, fighting partly to free the enemy soldiers themselves. The absence of Vader from the Empire's first months changes the military balance more than the political one. Palpatine still possesses the clone army, and he still possesses the Senate's emergency machinery. He still possesses governors and intelligence agencies that can be transformed into imperial institutions. What he loses is the one enforcer capable of combining Jedi-level power with intimate knowledge of the Order. That affects the Purge. The Inquisitorius can still be created. Fallen Jedi still exist. Temple records still exist. Sidious can still recruit servants, but Vader would normally become the central figure above those hunters. Without him, the early organization is less disciplined and more dependent on Sidious's direct attention. That gives surviving Jedi more space, not safety, space. A Jedi who escapes the first clone attack has a better chance of disappearing before a specialized hunter reaches them. The rebellion benefits from that. Ahsoka begins collecting reports of survivors earlier. Some are unreliable. A civilian claims a Jedi crossed one planet, A former clone says his general survived an ambush. A smuggler reports transporting someone with a lightsaber, and Ahsoka cannot investigate every rumor personally. She creates a verification network, and that is the beginning of an organized Jedi underground. Obi-Wan is wary. He knows concentration is dangerous. Order 66 succeeded partly because the Jedi were identifiable as one institution. If survivors gather in one place, Palpatine can destroy them again, so the network remains decentralized. Safe routes, code phrases, temporary shelters, no central academy, no grand announcement that the Order survives. This approach aligns naturally with the structure Bail and Rex are building. The rebellion becomes interconnected through cells before it becomes a unified army. The free companies provide escorts, Senate contacts provide documentation, and Ahsoka verifies Jedi. Bail moves money, Padme identifies political allies, and that is what acceleration looks like realistically. Not a Rebel Alliance fleet appearing in the first year. Functions that canon would develop separately begin coordinating immediately. The clone component makes this coordination more militarily competent. Canon rebel cells often begin as local movements, learning how to fight the Empire through experience. Here, some cells receive training from veterans who have already fought a galactic war. Rex can teach convoy interdiction, Jesse can teach boarding operations, freed clone pilots can train volunteers, and medical personnel can create evacuation protocols. This reduces the learning curve. It does not solve material shortages. The Empire inherits Republic shipyards. The Rebels do not. The Empire can replace a lost fighter squadron, and the Rebels may not be able to replace one freighter. So clone expertise shifts toward asymmetric warfare. Do not fight Star Destroyers unless there is no alternative. Attack fuel, attack information, attack prisoner transports, steal medical supplies, free people before trying to hold territory. These principles emerge years before the Alliance formally adopts similar practices in canon. The tribunal itself becomes too valuable to risk, and eventually Rex and Jesse make a difficult decision. The Venator cannot remain operational forever without a supply chain. Every maintenance cycle consumes parts they cannot replace easily. Keeping the ship hidden also ties hundreds of people to one vulnerable location. So the free companies strip it gradually. Fighters are dispersed. Medical equipment is moved. Weapons are stored across caches. Critical computer cores are preserved. The ship remains as a hidden base for as long as possible, but it stops being the symbol of the movement. This is strategically sensible. A capital ship encourages conventional thinking. The rebellion cannot afford conventional thinking. The most meaningful thing the tribunal carries is not its turbolasers, but its archive, where chip scans and survivor testimony establish what happened while Order 66 traffic and medical records preserve the chain of evidence. Copies are distributed so Bail, Ahsoka, Jesse, and separate hidden custodians each hold only part of the security burden, which means no captured leader can erase the record. Fives had carried the truth almost alone and died before enough people possessed it, so the free companies deliberately refused to repeat that mistake. Once the evidence becomes redundant, Senate resistance becomes much harder for the Empire to silence. Bail and Padme gradually build a block around specific claims, and they do not begin by saying, Palpatine is Darth Sidious publicly, and that accusation is true. It is also difficult to prove in a chamber Palpatine controls. They begin with the clone issue. Why were soldiers implanted with undisclosed behavioral devices? Why did those devices activate during a command targeting Jedi? Why did the Chancellor personally oversee the Fives' investigation? Why did the Kaminoans conceal the mechanism? These questions are narrower. Narrow questions can be harder to dismiss. Imperial loyalists respond by arguing the chips were lawful contingency safeguards. That defense creates another vulnerability. If the Empire admits the chips existed, it must explain why clones were never informed. If it denies the chips, independent medical scans contradict it. So Imperial messaging shifts. The implants were anti-mutiny safeguards. The Jedi somehow triggered instability. Rex's company is evidence of tampering. The story changes over time. Bail notices. Changing stories become evidence in themselves, and Padme begins documenting every official explanation. The public still cannot see the full contradiction because Imperial media dominates. Trusted senators can, and the anti-Imperial bloc grows. Some members are motivated by morality. Others are motivated by fear that Palpatine's centralization will eventually remove their own power. The rebellion accepts both. Ahsoka finds that uncomfortable. Padme says politics has always meant working with people for reasons you do not entirely admire. That is another difference between early Resistance and Jedi War leadership. The Jedi often approached alliances through moral clarity. Politics operates through overlapping interests. The Accelerated Rebellion has Padme and Bail teaching that lesson from the beginning. The clone question eventually reaches Kamino. The Empire is already suspicious of the planet because the clone program gives Kamino unique leverage. In this timeline, Rex's evidence makes Kamino even more dangerous. If Kamino and scientists confirm the chips, Imperial legitimacy suffers. Palpatine moves quickly to secure records. The Empire orders the facilities placed under tighter control. Nala Se becomes strategically valuable, and she knows what the chips were designed to do. Lama Su knows enough about Tyrannus's role to be dangerous. The free companies consider a mission. Rex wants records, and Jesse wants medical data. Ahsoka warns that a direct attack on Kamino would provoke an overwhelming Imperial response. The solution is infiltration. A small team of freed clones returns using identities that have not yet been flagged as deserters, and that is plausible only early. Imperial databases are still being consolidated. The team extracts fragments, not the entire archive. Enough. Embryonic implantation records, behavioral design references, security instructions tied to Protocol 66. The language is coded, and the pattern is visible. This evidence strengthens Bail's archive enormously. It also endangers Kamino. Once Palpatine realizes records escaped, the Empire accelerates the dismantling of clone production. That can produce an earlier version of the conflict later seen around Kamino's fate. The clone rebellion therefore creates consequences for clones still in production, and Rex feels responsible. Ahsoka tells him Sidious is responsible, and Rex says responsibility can have more than one level. That is a mature answer, and he chose the mission. The mission had consequences. Sidious created the system. Both facts matter. This becomes another cultural difference in the free companies. They reject the idea that good intentions erase outcomes. The lesson echoes through Anakin's imprisonment. Months have passed. Anakin is more stable. He is not free, and Padme has given birth. He has seen Luke and Leia only under supervision. That is devastating, and he understands why. Part of him resents it. That resentment is one of the places the dark side remains, and Ahsoka visits after hearing he demanded more access. Anakin says they are his children. Ahsoka says yes. Then she says they are not his possessions. The distinction mirrors Padme's words on Mustafar. Anakin hates it because he knows exactly why it matters, and his fall grew from treating love as something he had to control. If the rebellion simply gives him everything he wants because he is sorry, the lesson disappears. So accountability becomes practical. Anakin participates in debriefings, he provides intelligence, and he receives no command. He has access to the Force but no lightsaber. Obi-Wan trains with him occasionally, partly to prevent Anakin's abilities from becoming unmonitored and partly because suppressing the Force entirely would be impossible. Those sessions are tense. Anakin sometimes becomes angry. Obi-Wan stops. That boundary is new. During the war, conflict often ended because another mission arrived. Now they have time to sit inside discomfort, and this is how healing becomes more plausible. Anakin eventually provides the most important piece of evidence against Sidious. He describes the office confrontation. Palpatine admitted Sith identity. He offered knowledge of the dark side. He manipulated the confrontation with Mace. Anakin intervened. Then Sidious named him Vader, and the testimony is recorded. Padme asks whether it should be released. Bail says not yet. The political cost is enormous. If the public learns the hero Anakin Skywalker became a Sith and massacred Jedi, the Empire can use the confession to reinforce its argument that the Jedi were unstable. The testimony's strongest value is strategic, and it confirms Palpatine's identity to the rebel leadership. They no longer operate on suspicion, and the Emperor is Darth Sidious. That changes how every crisis is interpreted. A normal authoritarian might be constrained by political survival. Sidious is willing to sacrifice institutions if the sacrifice strengthens Sith control. The rebellion stops assuming Imperial decisions are motivated only by state interests. Sometimes they are motivated by dark side strategy, and Ahsoka becomes the person most capable of interpreting that. Yoda remains deeper in hiding. Obi-Wan spends increasing time away from the network because Luke's security becomes important, even with Padme alive, and this requires explanation. Why hide the twins if Vader is captured? Because Sidious is still alive. He knows Padme was pregnant. He may not know she survived, or that twins were born. If he learns, the children become leverage against Anakin and potential Force-sensitive assets. So Luke and Leia are separated temporarily. Leia remains with Bail and Breha under political cover. Padme maintains hidden contact. Luke goes to the Lars family, Obi-Wan watches him, and Padme hates the arrangement. She accepts it because keeping both children beside her makes one discovery catastrophic. This creates a different emotional landscape from canon. The twins are not orphans. Their mother is alive. Their father is alive but imprisoned, and the family is separated by security rather than death. That means reunification is theoretically possible if Sidious falls. The existence of that future gives Anakin another reason to cooperate without giving him immediate reward. He knows freedom is tied to becoming someone safe enough to be around his children, and that is powerful motivation. It is also dangerous. If he treats rehabilitation as a transaction for access, the underlying control problem remains, and Padme makes that clear. She tells him he is not earning the children like a promotion. He is learning to be a person who can love them without making fear their burden. Anakin eventually understands, not quickly. This long rehabilitation has another strategic effect. Sidious senses Anakin through the Force intermittently. The connection between master and apprentice does not disappear simply because Anakin is captured, and that creates a security risk. Yoda teaches Anakin techniques for stilling himself. Ahsoka helps. Obi-Wan helps. The effort is ironic. The Jedi who failed to teach Anakin how to handle fear before his fall are now teaching him under the most extreme conditions. Sidious searches. He cannot locate the prison precisely, and he knows Vader lives. That knowledge enrages him. He sends agents. Without Vader, the Inquisitorius begins hunting for Anakin as well as Jedi survivors. This diverts Imperial Force resources, and that helps the rebellion elsewhere. Again, one divergence creates pressure in multiple systems. The Emperor cannot ignore his missing apprentice because Anakin knows too much. He also cannot advertise the search. Publicly admitting Vader exists would raise questions about the Temple Massacre. So the hunt is secret. That secrecy gives Anakin protection. The same logic applies to Padme. The Empire announces her death. This is a deliberate rebel deception. A medical complication after childbirth provides a plausible public story. A funeral is held with a decoy body arrangement similar in spirit to the secrecy surrounding the twins in canon. Palpatine believes Padme is dead, and that reduces the search. Padme becomes one of the earliest hidden political leaders. Her disappearance from the Senate is a loss. Her survival behind the scenes is a greater gain, and she can coordinate without daily Imperial surveillance. Bail becomes the public face of moderation. Padme becomes the hidden architect. When Mothma joins gradually, this creates an early three-part political network. Bail preserves legitimacy. When Mothma builds opposition among senators, Padme coordinates with military cells, and Ahsoka connects intelligence. Rex connects clones. The rebellion begins to resemble an alliance in function before it uses the name. The first major joint operation proves the model. An Imperial detention convoy is carrying several captured Jedi and clone deserters. Ahsoka learns through a civilian contact, and Rex plans interception. Bail provides a false transponder, and Padme identifies a Senate security code that remains valid. Jesse assigns 2 clone boarding teams. The mission succeeds without firing on a populated world. The prisoners are freed. One rescued Jedi asks who is in command. No one has a simple answer, and that is intentional. The rebellion's strength comes from collaboration, and its weakness comes from the same thing. Decision-making takes time. Rex wants military clarity. Padme worries about civilian cost. Ahsoka worries about revealing Force users. Bail worries about political exposure, and every operation requires compromise, and the Empire acts faster. That is the price of decentralized legitimacy, and this analytical tension should remain. Democracy is not strategically superior because everyone agrees. It is more resilient because disagreement does not automatically require obedience. The rebellion is trying to embody that before it ever governs. Clone liberation becomes the moral test. A commander requests support for an operation that could free 200 clones, but risks exposing a civilian safehouse. Rex wants to proceed. Padme refuses. Rex accuses the political leadership of treating clones as expendable again, and the accusation lands hard. Padme says saving 200 soldiers by exposing 3,000 civilians is not liberation. Ahsoka mediates. The mission is redesigned. Only 60 clones are reached, and the safe house remains secure. Rex is angry. Later, he admits the decision was correct, and this is how the early alliance matures. Not through speeches. Through conflicts where principles have costs, the freed clone network grows more slowly than Rex wants. It grows sustainably. By the second year of the Empire, the free companies contain veterans from several former Republic formations. Some units operate entirely independently, others train local resistance. The 302nd remains the most experienced corps, and Jesse becomes nearly as important as Rex organizationally. That matters because a movement should not depend on one charismatic leader. If Rex dies, it must continue. The company has learned the lesson of fives. No single person should carry the whole truth. That doctrine eventually becomes one of the rebellion's greatest strengths. Maul remains the variable none of the emerging resistance groups can comfortably classify, and Ahsoka released him. Rex opened the hangar. They did it to save the Tribunal. That does not make Maul an ally. Once free, he disappears into the underworld and begins rebuilding whatever power he can salvage from the Shadow Collective. His position is weaker than it was before the Siege of Mandalore. Mandalore itself is lost to him. Bo-Katan survives. His criminal partners are unreliable. Sidious has just transformed the Republic into an empire capable of focusing resources inward. Yet Maul possesses something almost no one else does: understanding. He knows Sidious, he knows the Sith structure. He knows Anakin was the intended apprentice. He also knows Ahsoka survived Order 66 long enough to release him. If rumors later reach him that Vader never appears publicly in the form Sidious expected, Maul may infer something went wrong, and that makes him curious. The rebellion cannot afford Maul as a partner, and Ahsoka knows exactly what he wants. He sees institutions as tools. He sees people through utility. Any alliance would end when betrayal becomes profitable. Still, Maul's existence creates pressure on the Empire. Imperial intelligence has to monitor criminal networks, and Sidious has to consider whether Maul will expose Sith information. That distraction is small compared with galactic governance, and it is still useful. The free companies occasionally exploit criminal routes Maul destabilizes. They do not coordinate with him. This creates a broader strategic picture. The Empire faces 3 categories of opposition earlier than canon: political resistance from senators and local governments, military resistance from liberated clones and connected cells, criminal disruption from networks that do not want Imperial control. These groups are not one movement, and the Empire's greatest advantage is their fragmentation. Bail and Padme understand that. The Accelerated Alliance therefore focuses on coordination without forcing ideological unity. A former separatist cell does not need to love the Republic to share intelligence about Imperial troop movements. A Mandalorian group does not need to accept Jedi philosophy to shelter a refugee. A clone unit does not need to become a political party to protect civilians. This approach broadens the movement. It also creates risk, and some local allies are brutal. Some want revenge against former Republic worlds. Some criminals want payment rather than freedom. The central leadership has to decide where cooperation becomes complicity. Ahsoka is especially sensitive to that after Maul. She argues that desperation cannot become an excuse to build another Shadow Collective under a better name. Rex agrees in principle. He is more willing to work with morally gray actors if the mission saves clones. Padme often draws the hardest line. She understands that the future government will inherit the reputation of the Resistance. If rebel forces normalize assassination of civilian officials or collective punishment, defeating Palpatine will not automatically create democracy. These debates happen years earlier than the Rebel Alliance canonically faces them at scale. That can make the eventual movement more disciplined. It can also slow expansion. Again, acceleration in time does not mean acceleration without friction. The Empire responds to the Clone Rebellion by changing the military faster. Palpatine already has reasons to move away from clones, and they are expensive. They age rapidly. A recruited army can be much larger. Rex's uprising adds another reason: political reliability. A clone is supposed to be obedient. If hundreds begin defecting after learning about the chips, the Emperor can no longer treat clone identity as synonymous with loyalty. So the transition toward stormtroopers accelerates. Clone officers are retired, some are isolated, some disappear after questioning orders. Training facilities begin replacing veteran clone doctrine with Imperial ideology, and the change has military costs. Recruits lack the experience of men who fought from Geonosis through the final campaigns. Early stormtrooper units are more numerous but less cohesive, and the free companies exploit that gap. For several years, rebel clone veterans are often tactically superior to the troops hunting them. The Empire compensates through numbers and material. This creates a strange inversion. The soldiers bred for authoritarian obedience become some of the most experienced fighters for individual choice. The army recruited from ordinary citizens becomes the instrument of centralized rule. Rex sees the irony, and he does not enjoy it. He worries about what happens when the clone generation ages out. The free companies cannot build a permanent rebellion around men whose bodies mature faster than normal. So training civilians becomes essential, and this forces Rex to become something he never expected. An instructor for volunteers. The transition is difficult. Clones grew up inside military structure. Civilian recruits ask why, and they have families. They have political opinions, and some leave after training. Rex initially reads that as lack of discipline. Ahsoka reminds him that the ability to leave is the point. Rex adjusts. His training becomes less about obedience and more about competence under shared mission. That cultural change spreads through the early rebellion, and it may become one of Rex's most important legacies. Not a specific battle, a doctrine for turning citizens into soldiers without treating them as property. Jesse develops the complementary doctrine. He focuses on command accountability. Officers must explain high-risk orders when operational security allows. Refusal mechanisms exist for clearly unlawful commands, and that sounds almost absurd to veterans of the Grand Army. It also follows directly from their experience. The clone army was designed so lawful authority could become absolute. The free companies are designed so authority must remain contestable. This slows decisions. It prevents another Order 66 from being built into the culture. The Jedi survivors undergo similar reform. Yoda eventually accepts that the old order cannot simply be reconstructed while Sidious lives. The temple structure is gone. The council system is shattered. Survival requires smaller networks. Some Jedi resist, and they want to gather. They want to restore ranks, and they want certainty. Obi-Wan understands the impulse. Ahsoka opposes it. Concentration would create targets. More importantly, rebuilding the exact institution without examining how it became entangled with the Republic would waste the catastrophe. So surviving Jedi operate as guardians rather than generals. And they help evacuation. They protect local cells. They train only when trust is sufficient, and this creates a more decentralized Force tradition earlier. Luke and Leia eventually inherit that world. Their childhoods remain hidden for years, and Padme sees Leia through Bail. She sees Luke less often because Tatooine is harder to visit without creating patterns. The separation is painful. Anakin knows the children exist. He is not told exact locations at first, and that is a deliberate security decision, and he accepts it badly. Then he understands why. If Sidious reaches into his mind, knowledge can become a weapon. Not knowing is protection. This is the first time Anakin deliberately accepts uncertainty about people he loves because control would endanger them. That is genuine progress. Years earlier, he tried to conquer death because he could not tolerate uncertainty. Now he allows his own children to remain beyond his reach. That emotional change is more meaningful than a speech declaring redemption. Eventually, Yoda believes Anakin can be trusted with more. Not command. Trust. The difference matters. Anakin begins helping train small Jedi groups under supervision. He does not present himself as Master Skywalker. Some survivors would reject him outright. Others know what he did. The Temple Massacre cannot be hidden forever within the Jedi community, and Anakin accepts hostility. That becomes part of accountability, and a young survivor once refuses to sit in the same room with him. Anakin leaves. He does not demand forgiveness. Ahsoka notices. That is the moment she begins believing the change may last. Strategically, Anakin's knowledge of Sidious becomes increasingly useful as the Empire evolves. He understands how Palpatine speaks. He understands how the Emperor turns fear into false choices. He can identify decisions that look politically irrational, but make sense as attempts to isolate rivals. Padme combines that insight with Senate intelligence, and together, they begin predicting Imperial behavior. This is something Canon Rebellion never possesses. A former intended Sith apprentice analyzing the Emperor from inside his manipulation. The advantage is substantial, and it is not perfect. Anakin often overestimates Sidious's interest in him. He sometimes interprets every decision personally. Padme corrects that. Ahsoka corrects it differently. The collaboration becomes another form of rehabilitation. Anakin learns that insight does not grant authority. He can be useful without being in charge, and that may be one of the hardest lessons he ever learns. Palpatine senses change through the Force, and he knows Anakin is not simply imprisoned. The connection feels different. Less rage, less fear. That makes Sidious more dangerous. He understands exactly what it means when fear stops dominating Anakin. The apprentice he wanted is slipping away, so he tries to recreate the original pressure. Threaten Padme, threaten Ahsoka, threaten the twins if he can find them. Imperial intelligence begins searching for patterns around Bail Organa, and that puts Leia at risk. Bail responds by tightening security, Padme reduces contact, and Anakin is not told. He senses something is wrong, and the old panic returns. This becomes a test. He could demand answers, and he could try to leave custody. He could use the Force to find them. He does none. He tells Ahsoka he is afraid. That sentence represents years of progress. Fear is now information, rather than command. Ahsoka tells him Bail has increased security, and she refuses details. Anakin accepts. Sidious's attempt fails because the emotional mechanism no longer produces the same behavior. This suggests something important about any eventual confrontation with the Emperor. Anakin can become dangerous to Sidious not by becoming more powerful than he was on Mustafar. He was already extraordinarily powerful. He becomes dangerous by becoming harder to manipulate. The rebellion understands this. Yoda eventually begins considering whether Anakin could participate in a strike against Sidious. Obi-Wan is cautious, and Padme is more cautious. Rex is blunt. He says, if the plan depends on Anakin never becoming angry, it is a bad plan. Anakin agrees. That answer increases Rex's confidence more than any promise would. The question is timing. The Empire still has overwhelming conventional power. Killing Sidious without preparing for political succession could produce chaos. Imperial governors might fragment into warlords, and the military could retaliate against civilian worlds. The Senate may not restore democracy automatically. Padme argues the rebellion needs institutions ready before it attempts decapitation. This is another advantage of starting early. They have time to build political alternatives. A shadow council of senators begins drafting a restoration charter. Former separatist representatives are included secretly, and that is controversial. Some Republic loyalists call them traitors. Padme insists the Clone Wars cannot be repaired by pretending half the galaxy had no grievances. The charter proposes limits on executive emergency authority, and it proposes civilian oversight of military command. It recognizes clone citizenship. By the third year, the Resistance possesses more coordination than canon at the same point. It still remains underground. That is probably the most realistic long-term effect of Rex's refusal. The Rebel Alliance does not appear fully formed on day one. The conditions required for it develop years ahead of schedule. Shared intelligence standards, clone training, Jedi safe routes, Senate opposition, political goals, cell communication, medical support. All of those functions exist earlier. When a formal alliance is eventually declared, it inherits infrastructure rather than beginning from scattered movements. This can move major rebellion forward by several years, and the Empire responds by becoming more repressive earlier. That has costs. Palpatine curtails Senate influence faster, because senators are clearly coordinating resistance. He expands regional governor authority. He strengthens intelligence agencies. Each move improves short-term control, and each move confirms rebel warnings, and the political middle shrinks. Systems that hope to coexist with the Empire begin choosing sides sooner. This is another acceleration. Rex's refusal does not directly convince a planet to rebel, and it creates evidence. Evidence strengthens organizers. Organizers provoke repression. Repression creates recruits. The causal chain matters. The clone ships become a symbol far beyond clone rights. They represent the central argument against Palpatine. The Empire was built by removing choice. First from clones literally, then from the Senate politically, then from systems militarily. The rebellion's answer becomes the inverse. Choice must be restored at every level. That ideological clarity is powerful, and it also creates standards the rebels must obey themselves. When military commanders ask for emergency authority, civilian leaders remember the chips. When Jedi want unilateral action, Ahsoka reminds them what happened when the Order became too comfortable with military command. When local cells want revenge against Imperial civilians, Padme reminds them that collective guilt is another form of stolen choice. The movement is not perfect. It has a shared language for correcting itself, And that may be the deepest structural difference Rex creates, and he does not only save Ahsoka. He makes coercion visible at the moment the Empire is born. Once people see the mechanism clearly, building resistance around the opposite principle becomes possible. That principle will eventually matter when the rebellion decides what to do with Anakin. He cannot remain a prisoner forever. He cannot simply be released, and the movement needs an answer. Anakin offers one, and he asks to stand trial, not before the Imperial Senate, before the Resistance leadership and surviving Jedi. Padme is stunned. Obi-Wan is quiet. Ahsoka asks why. Anakin says because hiding what he did is another version of pretending someone else made the choice. The tribunal is not designed as public theater. It is a moral and institutional process. Surviving Jedi testify. Clones testify. Anakin testifies. Rex describes the temple from his own perspective under the chip. Then he draws the distinction again. Rex's agency was overridden. Anakin's was not, and Anakin accepts it. The judgment is severe, and he remains restricted. He cannot hold political or military command. He commits to service under supervision. Some survivors want permanent imprisonment, and Yoda argues that justice is not only punishment. The goal is to prevent harm and require responsibility. The decision remains controversial. That is realistic. No outcome could make everyone comfortable, and Anakin's future becomes one of service without authority. He helps train, and he provides Sith intelligence. He participates in missions only when leadership agrees his presence is necessary. This creates the possibility of confronting Sidious eventually without turning Anakin back into the center of everything. That is crucial. His redemption cannot become another form of exceptionalism where rules disappear because he is powerful. He must live inside limits. Years pass, and the rebellion grows. The twins grow. Rex ages faster than everyone around him. The Empire expands. The final consequences of that first decision on the tribunal become visible not in one dramatic victory, but in how many people are still alive to keep choosing. Palpatine would not simply watch this alternative rebellion mature without adapting, and the absence of Darth Vader would probably push him toward a more institutional form of terror much earlier. In canon, Vader gives the Empire something extraordinarily useful because he can solve problems that ordinary officers cannot. He can hunt surviving Jedi personally, intimidate governors without needing an army, and act as a symbol of the Emperor's power while remaining detached from normal political accountability. If Anakin is captured on Mustafar instead, Sidious has to replace that function with organizations, which means the Inquisitorius becomes more important sooner, while military governors receive broader freedom to use conventional force. That shift has mixed consequences for the Empire. An Inquisitor can be dangerous, but no individual Inquisitor combines Anakin's battlefield experience with his power in the Force, and without Vader supervising them, the organization is more vulnerable to rivalry. Sidious could intervene personally when necessary, although every hour he spends managing hunters is an hour he is not using on government. This is one reason the surviving Jedi Underground would probably remain larger than in canon, even though Order 66 still kills most of the Order. The Empire has more targets to chase, and a less effective chief hunter with whom to chase them. Not every clone defects, but the existence of the free companies makes desertion imaginable. Before Rex's broadcast, a clone questioning Order 66 has no model for what happens next. Afterward, he knows there is somewhere to go, and that changes the psychology of dissent. A soldier may remain in Imperial service for months while quietly collecting information, because he believes extraction is possible. A medic may begin scanning brothers. A pilot may alter a transport manifest. The rebellion acquires intelligence from inside the military earlier because clone resistance is not an abstract rumor. It is an organized route out. The Empire responds by separating clones from one another and by accelerating retirement. That reduces the chance of coordinated mutiny, though it also scatters angry veterans across the galaxy. Some settle quietly, others join local movements. A few resent Rex because they blame his rebellion for the Empire discarding them. Those differences prevent clone politics from becoming simple, which is exactly what a believable post-war landscape requires. The clones share an origin, not one political opinion. Rex's greatest achievement would therefore not be convincing every brother to join him. It would be making informed choice possible. That principle carries into the eventual formation of the Alliance. By the time Bail, Mon Mothma, Padme, Ahsoka, and the Free Companies are ready to connect their networks formally, they already have years of debate over authority. Who commands a joint operation? When can a military leader override a civilian leader? What happens if intelligence is compartmentalized too tightly? Can Jedi use the Force to influence political decisions? How do former Separatists participate in rebuilding something they once fought? None of those questions has a perfect answer, but the movement has been forced to ask them before it wins. That makes the early alliance less romantic and more durable. Padme's survival is especially important because she can bridge groups that would otherwise distrust one another. Republic loyalists know her as a senator who defended democracy during the war. Former Separatist sympathizers know she repeatedly opposed militarization and attempted negotiations. Clone veterans know she treated them as people. Jedi know she was close to Anakin without being part of the Order. Those relationships allow her to build coalitions Bail alone might struggle to create. Her hidden status limits that advantage publicly. Most of the galaxy believes she is dead, and revealing that she survived risks exposing the twins. So Padme becomes influential through private diplomacy rather than speeches. That may actually suit the early rebellion, where coordination matters more than symbolism. Mon Mothma gradually becomes the public political voice, while Padme shapes the coalition behind the scenes, which creates redundancy if one leader is compromised. Ahsoka fills a similar role on the Force-sensitive side. Because she left the Order before the Purge, she can speak to Jedi survivors without pretending the old institution should simply return unchanged. Some survivors want to restore the Council exactly as it was, while others believe the Order's military role helped create its vulnerability. Ahsoka can understand both positions because she loved the Jedi and walked away from them. Her network therefore develops around protection first and reconstruction later. Obi-Wan supports that restraint. He has Luke to protect, yet even beyond Luke, he has learned something from the fall that the old Council never had to confront so starkly. Centralization made the Jedi visible enough to be destroyed through one coordinated command. A future order should not keep every youngling in one temple while one government controls the surrounding planet. That does not mean the Jedi become entirely decentralized forever, but the immediate post-war period favors small groups and trusted relationships. Yoda carries the philosophical side of the reform. The failure of the Jedi is not that compassion was wrong or that the code itself secretly caused Sidious. The deeper problem is that the Order became too entangled with institutions it could not control, then continued acting as though service to the Republic and service to the Force were always the same thing. Order 66 proves the distinction violently. The Republic's army became the weapon used against the Order because the Jedi had accepted the army as part of their own operational identity. Rex's testimony makes that lesson impossible to soften. This is why the early rebellion would probably keep Jedi outside formal military command wherever possible. Ahsoka can advise, and Obi-Wan can protect. Other survivors can fight when necessary. The free companies do not automatically become Jedi troops again. The same lesson eventually reaches Anakin. After several years of supervised service, he becomes less useful as a symbol of regret, and more useful as a person who understands how the Empire thinks. He never returns to generalship. That would undermine the entire process. He can participate in carefully selected missions where his abilities are uniquely valuable, and those missions become tests of whether he can act without turning fear into control. The first time he fights beside Rex again would carry enormous weight. It likely happens during an extraction operation rather than a grand battle. An Imperial prison contains several Force-sensitive detainees and clone deserters. Ahsoka believes the prisoners will be transferred to an Inquisitor facility. Anakin's knowledge of Sith security architecture makes him useful. Rex objects, not because he believes Anakin will automatically fall again, but because clone veterans who survived the Temple may refuse to work beside him. Anakin says he understands. The team votes. That process itself would once have infuriated him. Now he accepts it. A narrow majority approves. During the operation, Anakin follows Rex's command, not as General Skywalker, as a specialist. When Rex tells him to wait, he waits. When the plan changes, he does not improvise without warning, simply because he sees a faster route. The mission succeeds. For Rex, the important moment comes afterward when Anakin does not ask whether he proved himself. He asks whether anyone was hurt. That is the kind of behavioral change people around him can trust gradually, because it is not centered on his own redemption. The clones remain divided about him, and some never forgive. Anakin accepts that too. This matters for the final question. Would the rebellion use Anakin against Sidious? Eventually, probably yes, but only after the political and military conditions make the risk worthwhile. A direct strike in the first year would be reckless, and Sidious controls Coruscant. He possesses enormous security. He remains one of the most powerful Sith in history. Even Yoda failed to defeat him cleanly when the Republic was collapsing. Sending Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and a recently fallen Anakin into the Imperial capital would give Palpatine exactly the concentrated target he wants. The rebellion therefore does the thing Anakin once hated most. It waits, not passively, it erodes. Clone defections increase. Senate opposition preserves evidence. Local cells grow. Jedi survivors disappear beyond Imperial reach. Imperial atrocities create political backlash. The Emperor responds with more centralized control. Every year, the difference between the Old Republic and the Empire becomes harder to deny. An eventual confrontation becomes more favorable, because Sidious loses legitimacy around the edges even while retaining military supremacy. The trigger could come when the Empire moves to eliminate the remaining Senate entirely, which in this timeline might happen much earlier. If Palpatine dissolves or neutralizes the legislature because opposition has become too coordinated, the last constitutional excuse for moderation disappears. Systems that were waiting now have a binary choice, and that is when a formal alliance is most likely to be declared. Several years after Order 66, rather than more than a decade, the Free Companies provide its most experienced military cadre. Local fleets provide ships. Former separatist networks provide routes outside Old Republic logistics. Bail and Mon Mothma provide political leadership. Padme provides hidden continuity. Ahsoka connects Force-sensitive survivors and intelligence cells. Rex becomes one of the senior military architects, and this is the accelerated alliance the premise points toward. It is not created because one clone refused one order in a vacuum. It is created because that refusal preserves the people and evidence necessary for functions that Canon Rebellion had to rediscover separately. That difference compounds. The alliance can begin coordinated sabotage earlier. It can infiltrate military supply systems through clone knowledge, before the Imperial bureaucracy fully replaces Republic procedures. It can evacuate political dissidents before arrests because senators are already connected to military cells. It can protect surviving Jedi through established routes. It can train local forces with veterans rather than improvising from scratch. The Empire remains stronger. The rebels become competent sooner. The Death Star becomes even more important under those conditions. Palpatine may push construction aggressively because conventional suppression is producing resistance faster than it can eliminate it. The project also becomes more vulnerable because the rebels have earlier military intelligence networks. Clone engineers may know people who moved into Imperial weapons programs. Former Republic officers understand procurement chains. A project of Death Star scale cannot exist without enormous logistics. This raises the possibility that the superweapon is discovered earlier, not necessarily destroyed earlier. Discovery alone matters. If the Rebellion learns Palpatine is constructing a planet-killing station, while the Senate still nominally exists, the political effect could be devastating. The Empire would deny it, and the rebels would seek plans. A conflict resembling the later Death Star intelligence campaign could begin years ahead of schedule. Here, Anakin becomes useful again. He understands Sidious's preference for symbolic control. He can explain why a superweapon fits the Emperor's psychology. Padme understands the political implications. Rex understands the logistics. Ahsoka understands the need to keep Jedi involvement hidden until evidence is secure. The result is a rebellion better positioned to attack the Empire's grand strategy rather than simply react to completed weapons. Whether that is enough to bring Sidious down early remains uncertain, and the Emperor is adaptive. If Death Star secrecy is compromised, he can accelerate relocation or purge personnel. If clone networks infiltrate too deeply, he can replace systems. If Senate resistance becomes dangerous, he can dissolve the Senate. Every rebel success can provoke a harsher Imperial response. That is why the final outcome should be described probabilistically rather than as guaranteed victory. Rex refusing to fire greatly improves the rebellion's starting position. It does not make Palpatine incompetent. The most likely long-term result is an earlier galactic civil war with a stronger rebel leadership and a weaker Imperial force hierarchy because Vader is absent. That war probably begins years earlier. It may also be bloodier earlier because Palpatine resorts to overwhelming force sooner. The rebellion's chances of eventual victory improve substantially. One factor matters above all, and Sidious does not have Vader. No one else combines Anakin's potential with Sith training. The Emperor can recruit Inquisitors, he can cultivate other dark side servants. They are not Vader. That makes any eventual Jedi strike more plausible, and years after Mustafar, Yoda may be older but still alive, and Obi-Wan remains capable. Anakin has spent years confronting his own fall. If those four ever reach Sidious together, the Emperor faces a dramatically worse situation than he did against Mace or Yoda alone, and the hard part is access. The rebellion therefore treats assassination as a strategic objective only when it can be paired with political succession. Padme insists on that. Remove Sidious too early without a replacement government, and the Empire may fracture into military dictatorships that continue the war. So the Alliance prepares both fronts. When the opportunity finally comes, perhaps through an Imperial crisis created by an exposed superweapon or a major sector defection, Anakin asks to join the strike. Rex does not decide, and that is not his authority. The Civilian Council approves. Anakin goes with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. Yoda may participate directly or remain the Force anchor depending on age and circumstance. This final confrontation is not inevitable in exact detail. The strategic conclusion is simpler. Sidious is much more vulnerable without Vader, while several powerful Jedi survive and coordinate. His personal survival becomes less likely over the first decade. If Anakin ultimately helps destroy him, the act means something very different from canon. He is not Vader saving Luke in one sudden return. He is a fallen man who spent years accepting responsibility before confronting the person who exploited him. The galaxy would remember him less as a secret monster restored in one final moment, and more as a deeply controversial participant in the rebellion. Some would never forgive him. His value would not depend on universal forgiveness, and that is another recurring principle of this timeline. Choice matters more than absolution, and the clone soldiers choose what they become after the chip. Ahsoka chooses to help an order that failed her without simply returning to its old structure. Padme chooses resistance without turning politics into vengeance. Obi-Wan chooses to love Anakin without excusing him. Anakin chooses responsibility without being promised restoration. Rex's refusal on the tribunal becomes the first visible example. The chip tells him to kill Ahsoka, yet he resists through the pain long enough to create a narrow space between command and action, and that space is where the alternate future begins. Thanks for watching. If there is another Clone Wars alternate timeline you want to explore, leave the idea in the comments below. Until the next video,